Okay, we are live with this evening's study session.
All right, well, good evening. Welcome to the study session for the board on June 8th. We do have an addition this evening in regards to, we'll be doing the scholarships from the PTSA. So thank you, Mindy, for being here and which to be able to do that. And then on the agenda is also looking at the plans for fall and then our budget and being able to do some more in-depth discussion on that. And then we end with an executive session. So that agenda is posted online as well. But with that, I'd like to turn it over, I believe, to Mindy Lincecum, our current LWPTSA district president. Correct? You still are president, right? Okay.
Are we? Well, good evening, school board members, superintendents, David, and staff. Thank you so much for providing time in your meeting for this celebratory occasion. Welcome also to our students and teachers that we honor tonight and their families if they were able to join us. As Siri said, my name is Mindy Lincecum and I'm the Lake Washington Council PTSA president. Each year, the Lake Washington Council PTSA offers scholarships for graduating high school seniors in the district. All funds are provided by donations from our 44 local PTAs, the council's annual scholarship basket auction, and by private donors. This year, we are awarding 13 student scholarships of $1,250 each, as well as 2 $500 scholarships to LWSD staff for their continuing education. Before we recognize our amazing award recipients, I want to introduce and thank our impressive scholarship committee co-chairs, Andrea Stepani and Riva Ramachandran. Their generosity in offering their time to lead this program was multiplied when school closures took place in early March. Under their creative and flexible leadership, a process that had previously largely been handled in person and on paper went electronic for submissions and judging. They extended the deadline for the application, they shortened the decision-making timeline, and ended up receiving a significant increase in both student and staff applicants. So I applaud their efforts, along with the support of our Council VP of Programs, Jay Pulico, that have made it possible to recognize these amazing seniors and staff this evening. And Andrea Stepani is going to introduce our award recipients.
I can't tell from, this is Andrea, I can't tell from this end if the PowerPoint presentation is available to broadcast.
And were you planning to share your screen or were you planning for me to share that? I don't know.
We can do it either way.
If you have it ready, I have it so that you can share your screen.
Okay, perfect.
At least
I will
it should work.
Okay.
There we go.
And let's see if you guys are, let's see, slideshow from start. Are you guys able to see it now?
You need to go to the little icon on the bar and click on share, and then we should be able to see your PowerPoint.
That didn't work. Let's see, share. Okay, I think hopefully this will work. Okay, are you guys able to see it?
Good job, thank you.
And that worked?
That works.
Okay. I'll see. Okay, so yes, okay. Thank you so much for your patience. And thank you, Mindy, for the introduction. As Mindy noted, our scholarship program is open to graduating seniors across the entire district from any of the high schools. Likewise, our judging pool represents all parts of the district as well. And we had, sorry about that, we had 18 judges across 8 teams that evaluated 106 applications this year, so that was tremendous. I am pleased to present the winners of our 2020 scholarship program. We are thrilled to have a recipient from every high school in the district this year, and I will now introduce you to each of our recipients. Our first recipient is Victoria Backness. Victoria received a staff scholarship for continuing education and is a teacher at Ben Rush Elementary School. She was a Lake Washington School District student from kindergarten through 12th grade. Victoria is pursuing a master's degree in learning and technology and plans to use it in her classroom and in support of other educators. Our next recipient is Crystal Visperis. Crystal is a teacher at Eastlake High School and is in her 14th year of teaching. She will be pursuing her master's degree in curriculum and instruction and is passionate in continuing her teaching career through the lens of social justice and equity. Our first student recipient of a merit scholarship is Daniel Gagrin. Daniel is a student at Eastlake High School. He is an active member of Centro Cultural Mexicano nonprofit center in Redmond. Daniel also has won numerous top scholar awards and is a classically trained pianist, guitarist, and trumpet player. He will be attending Stanford in the fall. Our next recipient is Kaylee Birchfield. Kaylee also attends Eastlake High School and participates in varsity swim team, orchestra, speech and debate, and theater. She also is a lifeguard and swim instructor. Kaylee has earned numerous academic awards and plans to attend Baylor University. Our next recipient is Allison Lofquist. Allison attends Juanita High School, where she especially enjoyed her STEM class, which allowed her to job shadow surgeries at Evergreen Hospital. She is also a member of the varsity gymnastics and track teams, where she has been co-captain and won numerous awards. Allison plans to attend Boston University in the fall. Our next recipient is Annalisa Muller-Eberstein. Annalisa is a student at ICS and has been very active in Model United Nations for many years. She is also active in ICS's student leadership, FBLA, orchestra, and in various volunteer roles. Annalisa has won a number of awards for her academics and club activities. She plans to attend University of Washington. Our next recipient is Jen Estes. Jen is a student at Lake Washington High School. She has played club and school soccer and basketball on state-level winning teams while also participating in many clubs, including Honor Society, Loyalty Club, and Young Life, all while maintaining excellent grades. Jen plans to attend Princeton University in the fall. Our next recipient is Megan Wong. Megan is a student in the Cambridge program at Juanita High School. Her rigorous coursework has earned her the Cambridge Scholar Award with distinction and the highest mark in the U.S. on the IGCSE physics exam. She also has been a member of swim team, orchestra, and Model United Nations. Megan will attend the University of Washington in the fall. Our next recipient is Arpit Ranasaria. Arpit is a senior at Redmond High School, where he is president of the Science Olympiad Club, Math Club, and Physics Club, as well as VP of the National Science Bowl Club. Arpit turned Science Infinity from a small club into a nonprofit that has raised over $35,000 to promote the sciences in education. He plans to attend Stanford. Our next recipient is Tina Wen. Tina is a student at Tesla STEM. She has balanced her interests in athletics and the arts. She swam on her high school swim team all 4 years through state level and played varsity tennis. Tina also plays piano and has competed in events in New York and Washington over the past 13 years. She will attend Rice University in the fall. Our next recipient is Eric Hiller. Eric attends Emerson High School and is a recipient of the L.E. Scar Scholarship. Eric is an avid bike rider and enjoys working on bikes in his car. His references called out that he excels at responsibility. At his job, he was quickly moved to shift manager. At school, he has served as a role model for underclassmen and showed them that hard work can pay off. Eric plans to attend Lake Washington Technical Institute in the fall. Our next recipient is Julia Raffel. Julia attends Eastlake High School. She is a winner of the Lake Washington Education Association Teeley Scholarship for students pursuing a degree in education. Julia played volleyball for Eastlake and is also active in the Senate Junior Orthopedic Guild, Days for Girls, and a number of other clubs. Teaching is her passion, and she will be studying elementary education at Arizona State University. Our next recipient is Thomas Safer Lopez. Thomas is also a student at Eastlake High School and is the winner of our Perseverance Scholarship. Thomas has participated in Eastlake's Band and Wind Ensemble, Latinos Unidos, and the Equity Student Activity Advisory Board. He is also part of the Lynx crew and a mentee with Young Executives of Color. He plans to attend University of Washington. Our next recipient is Santiago Quiroga Medina. Santiago is a student at Redmond High School and is the winner of our Turnaround Scholarship. This scholarship is awarded to a student who has demonstrably turned their academic career around. Santiago enjoys playing basketball and is a self-taught ukulele player. He also plays the piano and is a participant in Latinos Unidos. He became a Running Start student at Bellevue College and developed an interest in communications. Santiago plans to attend Seattle Pacific University in the fall. And our last student recipient is Grace Zakula. Grace is a student at Juanita High School and received our at-large scholarship. She is a member of varsity swim and dive teams, as well as gymnastics, band, and honor society. Grace won the President's Volunteer Service Award for her volunteer efforts, including for HopeLink, American Diabetes Association, and Northwest Trail Runs. She will be attending the University of Washington in the fall. Our scholarship program would not be possible without the support of the 44 local PTAs in our district, the high school, college, and career specialists who encouraged these students to apply and who have continued to support us throughout this process. Also, our auction chairs, Melissa Stone and Colette Ulloa. The Washington Education Association and the Lake Washington School District were also supportive of this program. And finally, I would like to thank our judges and my co-chairs, Riva Ramachandran and Jay Pulakode, and of course, all the wonderful students who submitted their applications for these scholarships. Please join me in congratulating them on this accomplishment.
And as is traditional in some other meetings I have been in, everybody should unmute and give all of these students a hand. We certainly wish they were here in the boardroom with us. And Siri, you are muted, I believe, still.
I am not.
There you are.
But I want to say thank you very much. That was fabulous. As always, it gives us a taste of sort of the passions, dreams, talents, and the future of where our students are and where they're going. So it's great to hear all those things. So thank you for all those efforts in getting that done. Any other board member have a comment? Director Stewart?
Yes, just wanted to warn the students going down to Texas. It'll be about 85 until about, November 3rd or 4th. So to be prepared, same way with Arizona. And the young man going into communications at Seattle, anytime I can be of service to as a PR person for the last 40 years, let me know.
Thank you. And Director Sage?
I would just like to commend everybody that in this difficult school year, you were awarded and acknowledged for your hard work throughout high school, but also this particular year, and thanks for hanging in there. Good luck.
And Director Carlson, you did have your hand up. Are you still interested in speaking?
Well, yeah, sorry, my video is on the fritz, but I just wanted to say thank you to all of our PTSA coordinators. The students are wonderful, but thank you for giving us a piece of normality in this very abnormal year.
Yes, thank you very much. Any other comments? All right, with that, I want to say thank you very much for your time and putting together that fabulous presentation. It actually was very helpful to be able to see the pictures. It was fun to have students in sort of their environment, not necessarily in a formal setting. So that was kind of fun to see. So thank you very much for taking the time to do that. And so with that, I think we will be moving on to our next item on the agenda, which I believe is looking at the getting ready to learn in the fall.
Yes, and I would just like to say if any of our PTSA members want to leave the meeting, we understand that you may be clicking out of the group. So thank you for joining us. We are updating tonight. We've had a series of updates and we will continue to do that. We're also pushing updates out onto the website as they continue to grow. And Mike and his team will provide some updates, as well as I believe Sally and Dr. Holman have some additional things to share tonight as well. So I'm going to turn it over right now to Mike Van Orden.
Good evening. So we are providing some updates on our planning for next year. As you recall, last time we met, I believe Matt Gillingham gave kind of a high-level overview of the organizational structure for our return to school planning. And if you remember, we had a number of key areas. And so our plans tonight are to share more details in each of those areas. We have a number of people here to help with that tonight, and so some of them will be presenting, some are also available to answer questions. Just want to acknowledge before we jump into the formal presentation, all the people behind this really complex, demanding work. We're basically reinventing public education in a matter of weeks and months, and people are putting in significant efforts to kind of reimagine, re-envision, and reinvigorate the education that we're providing to our students. We know that there was a very abrupt transition as we moved to remote learning, and our goal is to learn from that, to expand on that, improve on that, and really get ready for next year with still a limited amount of time, really, even with months to plan. We're doing some pretty heavy lifting. So tonight we want to share with you updates on each of the areas on which we're working, and we'll have different folks presenting for each of those. So let me pull up the presentation here. And just want to confirm everybody can see that okay? Okay, taking by nod. So if you recall last week, we mentioned that we had three kind of big areas around which we were planning. One is probably the most significant, just in terms of how it impacts everything else, are the different scenarios under which we might return to school next year. And that would be whether students are all in school with social distancing enacted, whether some of our students were in school on some days and some were at home other days, and we rotated schedules, just all the different possible scenarios. As you also may know, the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction is working on some guidance. That guidance was scheduled to be out today. We just got word this afternoon that they still have some work they want to do to make sure that they have a high degree of confidence in it. So we're expecting that additional guidance to come at the end of this week. And our plans will be to take that guidance and make adjustments to what we share with you tonight. So the scenarios group is probably the most significant in terms of the guidance we'll get from OSPI. Will most likely be related to possible scenarios under which we can return next year. In addition, our focus will be to make sure that kids are learning, and so we have elementary and secondary groups that are planning curriculum, instruction, and assessment changes that we'll need to make as we return to school in very different conditions. And then finally, we know that some students will need more and will have unique needs. We also know that some of our staff will need more and have unique needs, and so we have a group that's very specifically looking at different unique needs that are in our system, and what adjustments do we need to make to the way we deliver instruction, and what adjustments do we need to make to the way our staff come to work and show up and support kids every day. And so groups are working on that, and then all of those are coming together and being kind of coordinated with a central steering committee. So our plan tonight is to share with you more specific updates on what's happening in each of these, who's on the different work groups, and some of the work that's happening. And as then Dr. Stava mentioned, we'll be providing regular updates as we have more information from each of these groups over the coming months. So with that, I wanted to start by just sharing some of the guiding principles that all of the groups are using to make sure that our work is coherent and cohesive. As we think about moving forward, we have lots of different interests and needs that we're paying attention to. One of the most important, and obviously it's front and center, is making sure that we're protecting the health and well-being of the people in our schools. And that includes our students, our staff, our families, as well as our community members, because we know that the people in our schools are part of a larger community. And so making sure that we keep people safe, make sure that we are working to create social distancing guidelines that allow people to come and connect to school. At the same time, we can't forget our core purpose is to educate each and every one of our students. And so as we think about finding that nice balance between making sure people are safe, but not abdicating our responsibility to educate students. I think as we made the transition, we probably were really focused more on the safety because of the rapidity of the move that we had to make. but we also know that we have to have a better way of educating all of our kids as we move into the coming year. We also want to make sure that we are making connections with our students. Remote learning does have sometimes have the way of making it harder to connect with people, and so we want to make sure that those human interactions are enforced and are part of the learning that is happening. Even in remote settings, we can have human-to-human interactions that are live, but also thinking about what do those interactions look like when we're in person. The last couple, we want to make sure that we're very carefully and very intentionally thinking about the inequities that exist in our system and the inequities that have been exacerbated by COVID. But we're also being very proactive in how do we approach coming at those inequities in different ways so we can ensure students are learning. And so we'll share some of the things that we're thinking about tonight, but that will be also part of the planning as we move forward. And then finally, we know this can't be successful if we don't engage our families. That's always important, but now more than ever, when much of the learning is occurring in the home setting and we're dependent on families to be partners with us in that, we have to do a better job of engaging our families. So as all of these groups are working together, we are keeping these guiding principles at the center of our work and going back and referring to them as we come up with plans. And if we can't answer affirmatively that we're addressing these principles, then we need to go back and rethink them. So with that, what we're planning on doing tonight is giving you updates in each of the major areas. So Barb Postumus is going to start out with some of the scenarios work that's happening, and then Barb, I'll just transition the slides when you're ready.
Great, thank you. So good. So I am Dale Cody and myself are overseeing the scenario planning group, and we are really taking a look at the different hybrid options that will allow us to meet physical distancing. So, and look at the benefits and challenges and constraints for each, and determining really are there any models that absolutely, can be ruled out. So that's kind of what our work group is doing. So go ahead, Mike, with the next slide. So our membership we have a variety of central office staff and district staff. We have folks from business, folks from our assessment group, elementary education, folks from HR, our risk and safety manager. I'm not going to read every single position on here. We have principals representing both elementary, middle, and high school level, middle school counselors. Our LWA president, Howard, is part of this group. Since this list was done, we actually added additional elementary and secondary teachers to this group. And then we also have a parent on this group, Ann Tran. She is also on our facility advisory group. It's been a good group, and it's nice to have that parent voice that's also been working with us for a year on our facility advisory committee. Go ahead, Mike. So our group, we've had 2 meetings so far. We had our first work group meeting last week on Tuesday, and our second work group meeting on Friday, and then we have 2 more meetings scheduled so far this week. And in between those meetings, we're checking in with our main return to school committee after each meeting. Go ahead, Mike. So the models that we're looking at, and we know that there's lots of different options out there, and we've seen recommendations. Our committee's been reviewing recommendations that other states have put out, such as Maryland and Michigan, and so one of the ones. So we're focusing kind of on 3 different types of models, and the first one is really a 1-day or 2-day rotation. So students are attending 2 days a week, and then they're remote 3 days a week. And whether that's Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Wednesday, what days they attend, we're also kind of looking at what might be best for that. But that really gets you to a 50% capacity. So half the school is attending 2 days a week, the other half of the school is attending 2 days a week, and then learning remotely the rest of the days of the week. The second model that we're looking at is students attending 1 day a week, and then remotely the rest of the week. So it gets, you have a 25% capacity model where you only have 25% of your students coming in each day, and then they're working remotely the rest of those days. And then the third model we're looking at benefits and challenges is having a 1 week or 2 week in person and then 1 week or 2 weeks remotely. So, and you could do that various ways. You could really have 100% of the students in for 2 weeks, for example, and then everybody stays home for 2 weeks. Or you could have Group A attend 1 week or 2 weeks, and then Group B attend the next group of 1 week or 2 weeks. So those are the models that we're working on benefits and challenges for. So go ahead, Mike, to the next slide. So some of the things, there are lots more questions than the questions on these slides, but some of the questions that we're talking about in our group is, do students still attend a full day? So if we do this rotating model, are students there the whole day? Should we extend the school year to ensure students get enough learning? What does lunch look like in these scenarios? How do we feed, for example, if you're doing a A-B schedule, how do you feed students that are at home that day? What should pull-out services look like, such as our Pull-Out Quest, our English language program, our safety net services? At elementary, can you have recess and still social distance? At secondary, the groups are talking about, do you still maintain your 7 periods a day, or do block schedules work better? What does transportation look like in all this? You certainly, the challenges of social distancing on a bus, we certainly can't necessarily social distance and transport everybody to school, depending on how many students are coming to school at the same time. So, and then how are classified staff used under these different scenarios? And do we start with a hybrid model and then go in person later in the year? So those are just some of the many questions that the groups have been talking about. And so and so again, we've had 2 meetings so far, and the elementary group has been working through many of the scenarios and again, identifying benefits and challenges. I'll just give you an example of right now, when everybody's 100% remote, the teachers are focused on remote learning. If you have those hybrid models where you've got some kids in class and some at home, how does the teacher manage doing both remote and in home? And again, at our secondaries, one of their main questions is, what does the schedule look like? And and the guiding principles really were a focus on our secondary, is in person really priority, or is, social distancing and health and safety more of a priority? So those were things they were looking at. Or how do you divide, if you do an A-B schedule, how do you divide your secondary? Do you do it by grade? Do you do it by class? So those are some of the things that group is looking at. So lots of questions and lots of good conversations going on. So you can move on to the next. So
did we want to stop at each section and take questions? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I think Director Stewart and then Director Sage, if we could.
Barbara, I noticed in your 9 scenarios, none of them address special needs in particular. I mean, the special education in particular. Number 4 has stuff for pullout, but nothing else. Can you tell me how you're addressing these scenarios for special needs students?
So that's Matt Gillingham will talk. We have a 3rd work group that's really focused on those, on the special needs and those scenarios. So, and then we'll all, yeah.
I just want our folks that are watching at home think that it wasn't going to be addressed. So thank you.
And Director Sage?
Thank you. It's great to hear that you've added teachers to this work group. Do you know off the top of your head how many teachers are now part of it?
So we have a total of 4 staff members that are teachers. So including our LWA president, not including, in addition to our LWA president.
Right. So 4 teachers, and then I see that you have 1 parent. That concerns me, that we have 1 lonely parent out there and no students. Is there any thought about adding another parent rep or increasing student voice?
So that's a great question. And I believe I think Matt's going to talk at the end of this presentation about our next steps as far as surveying both families and students to get their feedback on through Thought Exchange, so we can get their voice through that as well.
Great, that was my next question.
Okay.
Do you know how you will advertise Thought Exchange and that opportunity? Where will parents find out about that and students?
So I'm going to have Matt talk about that at the end.
Okay.
Okay.
And then last thought, my friends who are co-teachers seem to be rocking it right now. And I'm wondering if we're going to be considering co-teaching as a model. And Matt can answer that later if he's on his plate.
I can touch on it briefly too, and we also have Shannon Hitch here tonight who can talk a little more as well. It's something we're still thinking about. It's twice as many people in one session, but it is something that actually, and I'll just acknowledge it so that Dr. Hitch can mention it at the end, actually has a kind of a professional learning plan and a plan for supporting students with disabilities next year, and I know co-teaching is a part of that.
Thank you.
All right, and Director Carlson.
Yeah, thank you for the update. I'll be interested to know because it's elementary and secondary. It's more than just recess and 7 periods that are differential between those levels. And I in a lot of ways, I consider them to be 2 separate problems. So as we go forward, I'd definitely like to sort of distinguish between what should lunch look like. I mean, what do things look like for elementary versus what do things look like for secondary? So anyway, that's just a comment, not a question.
Yes. And the groups are asking those same questions.
Thanks. And so I just have a few questions along the lines of, as I look through these scenarios, I'm wondering, when we were looking at facilities and the option of how do we deal with space, a split shift had always come up. Do you do a morning and an afternoon? Is that something being considered as a scenario?
I think we've talked about it. I think the challenges with a split shift, meaning you have a group of like an A group coming in the morning and a B group coming in the afternoon, that is one of the hardest schedules to provide transportation for, because you have to transport all the students to school, then turn around and pick another set of students up and transport them back to school. And then, so you're essentially doing, instead of one drop off and one pickup every day at school, and you know how that looks at each of our schools, you're doing that twice. So you've got 4, in a sense, 4 drop off and pickups during the day, and that's definitely challenging. So that is.
It's also challenging with the cleaning protocols.
Yes.
Absolutely, although it does give some benefits on other ways. That benefits you on the lunch issue and doing that. It also provides possibilities. So I think there's the pro and cons. So I do think that's important to be weighing those out. Transportation definitely is one component. I also think of work schedules, families, and consistency in days, and those sorts of things can play out too. So on a bigger picture, and Cassandra mentioned this along the lines of who's here, I recognize Thought Exchange is one way to get feedback, but there is a piece, especially in this time frame, of having people at the table with that discussion. So having students, especially our high schoolers, to be able to be part of these discussions in some way, I think would be highly valuable, both from a learning perspective, also just from agency, having some control in this situation where you feel you don't have a lot. So I would encourage that we look to be more inclusive even at the table with our students and our parents, because I think those voices are going to be important at the table, not just to get feedback on what's there, because I think they bring different perspectives. So I guess that's just one of my concerns. I know there's a lot with scenarios depending what goes on in the shifts and what we're learning about what is acceptable, what's safe, what isn't. Appreciate the guiding principles that have been put out. I think that's helpful. But I do encourage that we get the community at the table where decisions are happening so they can hear those discussions as well.
I think you have a couple more hands up.
So Director LaLiberty.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to find the slide, so you may be repeating something you already said. What was the timeline on when these groups are meeting, when we'll start seeing thank you.
So right now, we've got meetings scheduled for the next 2 weeks. And again, we may have additional meetings. So right now, we have meetings scheduled last week and this week. So that's the current schedule and at this time.
Is the idea that this work group will prepare or provide a recommendation? Is that the product we should expect from it?
So I think the next steps is for all 3 work groups to be working together and then coming together to make some recommendations once we get OSPI. We also are waiting for guidelines from OSPI because we don't want to get ahead of those guidelines either.
I think it might be helpful to see the rest of the presentation and kind of how all of the pieces fit together, and then talk through again the progression of how that begins to blend together for decisions as we get closer and closer. There are some things that we want to have some pieces in place to message before people, quote, leave for the summer, but there's also going to be a lot of things going on over the summer, and we are also watching just the activity of our state and how our county is released and all of that. So it's trying to put plans to things that we don't have all of the variables in place yet, but yet wanting to give people a good solid idea of scenarios and possibilities, and then as that gets narrowed into what's actually possible over time, that's the goal right now. But I do think it would be helpful in some of the questions that you may have to see all of the chunks and then have the additional questions.
Okay, so with that, if everybody's okay, why don't we hold off on those questions and let's go forward with the instructional piece unless there's something burning. I see all hands going down at this point. Nope.
Burning.
Mark is burning.
Okay, Director Stewart.
Yes, I'm very concerned the fact that there's not a special needs parent on this planning group. The special needs parents always feel like they're being asked to react to something and they were involved in planning something. I think that it's a massive oversight. We don't have them involved in the planning and the contemplation. First of all, it's important for those students. Second of all, the families will impact.
So Mark?
Yes.
So Mark, as I mentioned, Matt's going to talk about his group that does have parents, special education parents on the group. So I think, that'll be addressed.
So if you can hold the question as we work through this, and we can revisit it after the one by Matt that's done. How about that?
Let's go through to the end of the PowerPoint and then have questions over the entire picture.
All right, so our next section is instruction, and I'm going to have Kelly Pease and Jen Rose share some more details about the elementary and secondary focus in a moment. I do want to just emphasize a few things that came up earlier in the conversation. As you may recall, our plan is to develop our best thinking and actually have some planning that's occurring. And as we've been sharing, OSPI is going to be coming out with some guidance as well. And then we can align our plans with OSPI's guidance. Our thinking is if we waited until we had that guidance, we'd be well behind where we are now. So there will be likely some things we set aside and say, you know what, given the new guidance, those don't make a lot of sense, set them aside. Given the new guidance, these actually make a lot of sense and we have some good headway on them. And so, again, just that's kind of the context under which we're working. We're trying to build the airplane while it's in flight and know that we're going to be getting some new directions here by the end of the week. So know that that's coming in as well. Also, there are things that are dependent on one another. So, for example, once we have a set schedule and a set scenario, which we should be getting more clarity on from OSPI, but also we'll be getting updates throughout the summer, would be my guess, then we can start matching the instructional programs to those scenarios. And so again, we're developing lots of different possibilities for instruction that ultimately will have to fit in with whatever scenarios that we have. And so just know that our intention is to continue to plan, but as we get more clarity, to get finer and finer. So you'll hear some things tonight that in a month may not even be options. And so you'll hear some of that for instruction as well. So with that, Again, to give you kind of a high-level overview, and then I'll turn it over to Kelly and Jen. We have a work group that's focused on instruction and scenarios, and instruction at the elementary level, and another work group that's focused on instruction at the secondary level. And again, kind of going to Chris's earlier comments, there's such unique characteristics in both, and at the same time, there's a lot of overlap as well. So really, this group's charge is to be thinking about learning in the areas of academics, but also, we teach, we're very intentional about instructing in social and emotional learning and behavior. And so there are instructional programs and curricula related to those as well. And what do those look like at the elementary and secondary? In addition, as I shared at the beginning, our goal is to build on and create better approaches to learning and teaching. As you know, we made a very rapid switch at the closure, and we put some things together, and we know that there are better ways to deliver instruction. Whether, again, kids are in our schools some days of the week and at home some days of the week, there's going to be some level of remote instruction that we have to improve. So really, it's building on and improving what we already know and what we've learned, not only from our schools, but schools around Washington State, around the U.S. and internationally. We're learning lots of good things about how to deliver instruction. And as hard as it is, we are also, we're finding that teachers, their tech competencies and their skills with technology have improved at a greater rate than we could have imagined or probably would have been able to accomplish had we been in normal situations. Their ways of thinking about how to connect with kids are improving as well. So the purpose of this group really is to develop guidelines to say, here's how we deliver instruction when half of our kids are in the class and another half come the next day. Here's how we deliver instruction when our kids are at home some days and in class some days. What does it look like when we deliver in-person instruction? What's it look like when we deliver live instruction online? What does it look like when teachers maybe not there with the student and they're doing some independent learning? So all of those different ways of thinking about instruction in this very new way. So with that, Jen Rose, who is leading the secondary group, and Kelly Pease are going to take us through some of the work of their committees. And I just want to acknowledge both of them as well as all of the people who are working on their committees as well as the ones we've talked about already to really start to develop guidance. Also knowing how unusual these times are and how unpredictable the future is, they're really planning through lots of different scenarios. So Jen and Kelly, go ahead and just tell me when you're ready to move slides and I'll transition for you.
Okay. So we can go ahead and get started here. So Kelly and I had essentially the same process when we first got started over spring break with our work groups. And we can talk a little bit about to the earlier points about how they're different. At the secondary level, we started with a group of about 17 to 19 teachers and additional administrators and some district folks. And we've expanded that over the past couple of weeks. So the group is actually at about 55 people right now. And the focus has been, for that group, has been on giving guidance and feedback and input towards, like Mike said, the overall structure of what we need to do to make sure our secondary teachers are really ready for the fall. And to bring up some of the comments from earlier, we are really thinking about not planning for 72 different scenarios, but being very clear about core instruction and flexible ways to deliver core instruction. So that's been a lot of the work at the secondary level, is to identify what the essential standards, essential learnings are. It's working from the work that we've already done this spring to think about what students have missed and what they absolutely have to have as we go into next year. So we're thinking some about making up the learning that wasn't able to be delivered with fidelity this past spring and thinking about how to deliver it more effectively over the year. And we're doing that in each content area, and especially in courses that build on each other, like Algebra 1 going to Geometry to Algebra 2. We have teams, so we have the overarching group of the secondary work group. And then in the content areas, we also have work groups of teachers that, especially in those courses that build, that are identifying key learnings and knowledge and skills, so that as a system, we can be really collaborative and really clear. Some of the great things from that with this group have been the depth of collaboration and alignment in the content areas and in the courses has just been great. We've got teachers coming together. Some of the groups are meeting once or twice a week to build out that content and the resources that teachers will need. Our secondary group, remote learning group, was meeting, we met every day over spring break, and then we were meeting every other week as a feedback check to see how the learning was going in the overall system. And in the past several weeks, we've started meeting each week so that we can gather input and get more guidance from them and give more direction. The group is planning on turning into subgroups that will do more work over July and into August, so that we're really able to develop out the content and the professional learning that teachers will need in order to feel really confident as we head into the fall. So that's the brief overview of secondary, and Kelly can share the elementary overview.
Yeah, and elementary has been meeting around the same time when school closed down. We gathered a group of teachers, program specialists, administrators to support us in developing curriculum and practices to be used when we returned after spring break. It was a great, we talk about good outcomes that come out of things that are challenging, and really had the opportunity to work really closely with a group of amazing educators who were able to meet each other, learn how to collaborate well in the course of a remote environment, and turn out resources for their K-5 peers. After we did our first push of resources out into the system, we got some feedback that we needed to shore up some of the resources, and so pulled the group back together to gather some input around how we could make adaptations to better support teachers, to support students, and of course teachers to support families during this unique time in our history. As we talked about instructional, our timelines essentially were the development of core content, continuous feedback from our core groups, and then plan on from now until the beginning of August to put together clearer frameworks for teachers and focus our guidance around core standards. What is it that each child needs to know and be able to do? How are we making that content visible to parents? What students need to learn and know how to do? How do parents understand what it is that we are asking of students? How do students understand? So we want this seamless ability to toggle from in-person instruction to remote instruction and be able to flip on a dime, so that teachers aren't having to navigate two separate systems, parents aren't having to navigate two separate systems, and most of all, people feel the kids are getting a seamless educational experience. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, Jen?
Yeah, so one of the major pieces of information that we continually get back from the system is the need for professional learning for teachers and the real hunger for it. And part of what they really want to be able to do is collaborate with each other. So at the elementary level and at the secondary level, we've set up grade level teams at the elementary level and content area teams at the secondary level, so we can really get that professional learning going now, and also have it be a way that we're communicating. One of the ongoing discussions that we're having that will take some definite planning and thinking before we get to August is, what does that professional learning look like for teachers? Because it's very clear that the 6 work days before school technically starts, having 8 hours a day of professional learning is a model we need to rethink as we're thinking about assessment and instruction. So for the professional learning between now and August, that's a goal that we'll be partnering actually with multiple departments. It's been really nice as a system to be able to develop some coherence in terms of our thinking around instruction. I think we're ready for the next slide.
All right, so we have done some perspective taking, as well as had some conversations with parents, and plan to have some listening sessions in the next week or so to hear from through our dyslexia advisory group. We'll be hosting a listening session to hear how it's been going for students who we've built a relationship with through that advisory. But what we heard, and you'll see on the screen, is very similar things that each stakeholder needs. As we talk about a common platform, so parents aren't having to navigate PowerSchool Learning and then Teams and then maybe an Envision website and a Wonders website at the elementary school, looking to streamline that so that we're able to deliver something coherent to families doesn't take a lot of tech time to get the littles in and out of. If we think about other things that were common across all areas, is that parents are wanting clear communication from teachers in the district, and teachers are wanting clear expectations about instruction, assessment, feedback, how they're to communicate with families, the digital tools. And so at the end of the day, when we systematize our distance learning for students in Lake Washington School District, parents, students, and teachers are going to feel more at ease to be able to go in and out of the different educational environments, brick and mortar comparatively to distance learning, and be adaptive in doing so. Jen?
And I'll add that the feedback, so this specific guidance came from Kelly's committee, and then when she shared it with me, it was spot on for what the secondary remote learning committee said as well. So the 50 plus people on that team absolutely said that a huge learning is the need for coherence and really clear expectations across all parts of the system. And on the next slide, when we're thinking about what we'll do between now and August, you'll see that same repeated thought, that as we're planning for professional learning, we're planning for August, being able to be really clear about what expectations are from a standards and skills standpoint, and also schedule and assessment and where information is located. We know that teachers are going to need collaboration time, structured collaboration time with a real focus on those essential learning pieces, because the shift in instruction is so huge that it's going to be absolutely essential that biology teachers are able to come together and share effective strategies and resources so that we're able to be really flexible when we think about teaching and learning. And the discussion we've had in every content area isn't asynchronous or in person. It's really thinking that there might be a student who's out for 2 weeks because their little brother has COVID-19, and that student needs access to essential learning. There might be a group of a school that's out for a little while, and that school needs to keep on learning as well. So we're putting all of these different scenarios and possibilities in front of our teacher teams and these leadership teams to help plan for what's absolutely essential, and then what are flexible ways that we can reach that essential learning. So the professional learning part is actually very exciting, because I think it pushes same old is not going to work. So the collaboration and the excitement that teachers have working together and the urgency that they feel has really been great to work with. So that challenges us as well. If we're thinking about delivering professional learning, we need to deliver it synchronously and asynchronously and be able to think about that flexibly as well. We also want to provide, we've got teachers that have very different skill levels. And so it is on our departments to think about how do we support teachers with the required learning and collaboration that we need to have that solid foundation as a system. And then what are other learning opportunities for teachers as they think about their own learning needs and the needs of their students. Go to the next slide.
So we're fortunate this summer we're going to be offering through Intervention Services Summer Literacy Academy for our K-3 students. And we're taking this as an opportunity to do some action research about things that will maybe set the stage for what learning looks like in the fall. So we're going to be running concurrent synchronous, asynchronous, and paper materials learning for students and doing some small group instruction to see if we can pull off having kids learning at a similar rate, some synchronously, some asynchronously. And we'll take what we learn from our summer programs and apply it to our continued planning into next year. We want to ensure, as we're doing this, we're establishing those essential standards by grade level and content area. And it's also very important, we have an assessment gap right now between the middle of the year at the elementary, the middle of the year dibbles. We have no large scale assessment data. We have some formative assessment data that teachers have been doing with their students. But as a whole, we need to ask ourselves the question, what do students know and what don't they know? And so as we land on, our hope for is to be able to screen all K-8 students as we start the school year. The other thing that we've been doing this fall this spring, it seems like a year, this spring, is to focus on, at the elementary level anyway, that content was taught, and they then make their comments on the report card about student participation, like student participated in all of our team meetings, and thinking very on the positive end of that, not to do no harm. We know as we go into this new yet
not quite defined normal, that we will be grading students again. So another part of this work group is to give recommendations in conjunction with Tim Krieger and his team to provide grading guidance. And then the other thing that's going to be critical is that there are guaranteed and viable instructional routines and frameworks that are used in classrooms. So whether you're in person or you're learning in a remote environment, that what you expect kids to do in ELA and math fits within a framework. And we've heard from teachers and parents that it needs to be more predictable and more clearly defined.
And so part of the way that would happen on the previous slide would be thinking about the kinds of professional learning that teachers have. So just that last bullet there, that teacher time has a really directed focus in learning, where we think about how we're bringing teachers together, how they might use their PCC time to be really thinking about what are those essential pieces in there. And then on the next slide, you'll see again, it's a repeated theme of being consistent, having that course alignment and the grade level alignment, so that our students, we're doing the planning, so it's not our students trying to play catch up with us not having planned for that coherence. So the vertical alignment is really essential, and we have teams working on that K-5 and in the content areas with the classes that build on each other. It will be absolutely essential. I know we all became teams ninjas to some extent this spring, but being able to be really thoughtful about how we're using it consistently is going to be really important. That was huge feedback that I'm sure you've heard as well, that parents feel overwhelmed and students feel overwhelmed. And so an aspect that we've been thinking about is what specific learning do students need so they can also be flexible, synchronous, asynchronous learners. They just, March 11th, they had to start really doing a lot by themselves. And so for us as a system to think, what are the technology platforms that we want to make sure students are really solid on? What are the ways that we're teaching them some of the executive function pieces so that they can manage themselves if we're 1 week on, 1 week off, or they're out for 2 weeks for a variety of reasons. So those are things that we've been thinking about, ensuring that students get that learning and that teachers have that learning as well, so that we're aligned. That is going to take absolutely buildings working together as well to have building level agreements. And I think both level groups, the secondary and elementary remote learning, the teachers are very interested and very committed to really clear building level agreements so that the third grade team, all the kids in third grade have a similar high quality experience. All the students in a high school, if they're taking 7 classes, that there's coherence and predictability so that they're able to meet expectations. We also have heard really loud and clear that we need to plan for virtual, and we also need to have some sort of live instruction that happens. So those are the pieces that we're working at with that. And to Kelly's point, being able to be really clear about accessing and using data that we do have on students, and so we can use that to inform instruction, and really thinking about how we use formative assessment so that we're able to really meet students where they are in this very changed environment.
Yeah, and I understand that we've been talking a lot about core instruction, but also want to let you know that we are working with our groups of safety net teachers and EL teachers under intervention services purview to ensure that they are developing and building synchronous, asynchronous, and other accessible resources for our students who may not have been able to engage this spring. We are going to be working diligently over the summer to figure out how to get all kids engaged in all learning for the 2021 school year. Thanks for your time tonight.
All right, so to wrap up our last section is Matt Gillingham's going to share the work of the unique needs.
The specifics around this work group, some of the questions I heard earlier is how do these work groups work together? And so we're all working under kind of the penumbra of this return to school task force. And so we're actually, the leads from each group are meeting, each work group are meeting on a weekly basis so that our work is informing the work of each other's. And so Our scenario group is really trying to look at what are the constraints and viability of different, some different hybrid options. You just heard the instruction group and everything that they're working through. The idea of the unique needs work group is to say that, we know that there are, we have students and staff for whom the disruption caused by COVID-19 is just more significant than it is for most. And we want to be really intentional about our planning for the 2020-2021 school year at the outset, and really trying to think around what are those needs, so that that can inform the scenarios that we plan for. It can inform the work around the instructional, academic, social, emotional needs that are going into place, and that also might just inform specific interventions in place to meet those needs. So this group is really looking at and trying to identify kind of who are the student and staffs that have unique needs that could place them in kind of a continued as a barrier for continued engagement in learning or work. So either because they're at higher levels of a health risk due to COVID-19, they experienced a greater than average disruption to their learning or well-being this spring, or potentially maybe they're doing okay right now, but depending on which model we're in and or how the year shapes up, they could be at greater risk moving forward. So looking at kind of who are those students and staff, and then thinking about their needs. So the work groups are really kind of digging into story and saying, what do we believe are the experiences? What additional information might we need to get to know? What are the assets that each group has? And then we'll be bringing that information back to inform the planning of all the other groups across the district. Mike, do you want to take us to the next slide, please? So, we've certainly heard, there's an interest in having community voice of students and staff. This group, we have 10 parents and a student who are participating in this group. The parents predominantly are coming to us either from our district equity team, they're parents that have been engaged in helping lead that work, or in our special needs parent group. And so it's really a diverse group. They've been really wonderful to work with. Appreciate them coming to the table and sharing their voices with us. We also have about 13 staff members that represent pretty much every group, every employee group within the district. Because there's an interrelationship between the needs of our students and the needs of our employees and how we think about that. So our paraeducators, our IAs, our bus drivers, our office managers and office staff, ELL teachers, special education teachers. We all have our teachers of color as well, who are maybe experiencing things this spring much differently than some of the rest of us. And then we have a handful of members from our district leadership team as well. And we've been actually meeting in small. We've broken this group into 6 subgroups. To really try to ensure that every member has an opportunity to have a voice and so we can create a space for us to really get the most out of what everybody has to bring. So, Mike, if you want to go to the next slide. So this group right now has a pretty short time frame. We're meeting intensely over 2 weeks. By the end of those 2 weeks, what we expect to be able to have is have identified some specific groups and specific needs that should be attended to in all planning efforts. Potentially, we've identified some potential different additional data sets that either we would seek to gather or use for monitoring purposes, or that also help us to surface areas that we might need to attend to. And then next week we're going to be moving into or actually it's this week, starting tomorrow, looking at what are some potential options that the planning group should be explored to help address or mitigate some of the needs that we'd identified. So this can be a group that we would extend if the members are willing to have an interest and are willing to continue to participate throughout the summer, so that as we get different iterations of plans, that we have kind of a stakeholder group that we can come back to. But I also kind of promised everybody that for right now the commitment was 2 weeks of intense work, and then they could choose to re-up or not. So Mike, let's go look at the next slide. So here's some of the student, staff, or family groups that we've identified. We've had a lot of conversations around the various needs of students that have special needs. They may be served with an IEP or a 504 or maybe an individual health plan. We may have some students actually who may be medically fragile that currently don't have an individual health plan, but that the calculus has changed due to COVID-19. And thinking about how we serve our students with cognitive or physical disabilities. I had a lot of conversation around what are the unique needs for our students of color, particularly our Black and Brown students, and then where we're also seeing that they may be suffering some trauma, that also we have issues of access, that technologically insecure, and then thinking about, as well as particularly if we're in a hybrid model of some sort, that the relationship to a family structure and the flexibility that might be needed in there. I think somebody earlier mentioned if a family member contracts COVID-19 and so they're needing to be quarantined for a time period, or where perhaps childcare comes into play. We've certainly seen that our families where language other than English is the primary language at home have lower rates of accessing our online learning, and so looking at how do we do a better job of addressing those needs. And then thinking about, like, particularly with our some of our employee groups that might have underlying health conditions or whose ages place them in kind of greater risk, and or that some of those employee groups are in a situation where they're either underutilized this spring, and we want to make sure that we're maximizing their skills and their talents, or that they potentially have higher rates of contact, physical contact with students, and thinking about how do we ensure that we are protecting both our students and our staff members. So it's a really robust conversation right now, and it's one where what we want to do is we're wanting to identify what are specific needs, but then also how are there some ways where we can think about how can we design intentionally so that the structures that we're setting ourselves up for can meet as many of these needs as possible at the outset, so that instead of planning for most and then trying to figure it out, that we're trying to plan for all and do the best that we can on the front end. So, Mike, do you want to go? Do we have another slide? Yeah. So we're not quite ready to report out some of the options that are being generated, but here's an example of some of the questions that the work group is coming up with. And thinking about different student needs, parent needs, and staff needs. I think one of the things that the group kind of has, also been looking at is, kind of the level of involvement, where we're seeing or hearing from our staff, they're actually seeing some, anecdotally, some different things around how students are engaging, and that we don't necessarily have some data sets around. The group has identified how do we identify, hear from students as to what some of their needs are, And so, so it's been pretty rich. One way that I'll just talk about now, that we're going to go and get some additional information is we're going to do a series of 3 thought exchanges. We use that to pretty good effect with our facilities planning group earlier in the year, and asking our community, and that includes our parents, our students, and our staff. Kind of a series of 3 exchanges, having them reflect on some of the challenges. We've been hearing things all spring, so while we think we have an idea of what some of those challenges were, we want to make sure that our community has an opportunity to really kind of voice what some of the challenges were. And then we'd be reporting back out on that. We'd share, then ask them to reflect on some of the successes. So there's a lot of things that we've learned. We are hearing things in this Unique Needs work group. We're hearing, from families that have a couple of children in our district, and in some areas it's working great. And there's some really positives in some other areas that it's not. So we want to kind of know, what do we need to build off of? And then, Mike kind of started us with thinking about what are some of our interests and priorities. And so we want to ask our community around those as well, so that as we look ahead to student learning and well-being, that we're listening from our community around kind of what are their priorities and interests, so that way we have an opportunity to, as we're doing this planning, to really make sure that it's well informed by that voice. So that's a brief overview of some of our work, and we hope to at least be able to kind of wrap up next week with enough of information that's going to help inform next steps. And then, of course, we'll hopefully also have some information around from OSPI in terms of maybe a little more of what the rules of the road are and what are some of the standards in which we need to work with, and that will allow us for all these work groups to come together and really start to refine some plans.
I'm going to just make us all mindful of our time, and we're happy to answer questions. We still also have some information from Sally, and we do have a budget presentation, and so this is overview informational, so we can answer questions. We can also take questions and answer them outside of our study session as well. So Siri, I'll let you direct the hands up.
Well, thank you. So first off, thanks for the presentation. I appreciate the overview of everything. I'm going to sort of mix things up of who starts first. So Director Carlson, if you would like to go.
So currently we're watching, we think we have the epidemic under control, but not, yes and no. But watching what's happening in Brazil as they go into winter and as we go into summer, it looks like summer's working in our favor and winter is going to really hammer Brazil. Has there been any conversation about literally moving our school year forward so we can get more school during the summer and maybe start earlier and end earlier before Christmas?
I think that's one thing that we're waiting to see what the OSPI guidance says, because that would require some level of flexibility with how we set that up. I don't know that earlier is as much of an option, just given preparation for doing this, but it's certainly something we can make sure enters into the conversation.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to say is I had a very interesting conversation last night with our former board member, Nancy Bernard, who is on the OSPI committee, and I do not have great faith on the basis of that conversation that OSPI is going to give you any meaningful guidance before August.
They've referred to it as bumpers, so we'll see how it aligns, but we're pretty convinced that we need to keep moving forward with our planning. I don't think it'll be out of alignment. We're hoping that some things might narrow what is and isn't allowable or add the flexibility factor, but we don't know if that's going to be true or not, so I would agree.
All right, Director Sage.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation, and listening through all 3 parts really does help get a big picture. I'm still wondering what the representation on each of these committees is, even from a staff standpoint. How many diverse staff members are represented in each of these committees or teams that are looking at, fall, do we have the background and experience that we need to help all students? Thank you for showing us that you have special education parents listed, and that it looks like there are students listed in that last group that Matt discussed. But from a staff perspective, do we have diverse staff members working on this?
We can review that. I think our folks have purposefully chosen people to look through multiple lenses, and we can go back and pass through that and see if we need to add to that. But the other thing is, we're trying to do this remotely, and we're trying to do this quickly, and we're trying to, I think, gather the people who can give us the most expertise in the most expedited ways, because this is pretty fast, intense, done in the least ideal way of doing that online. So I don't have all those lists tonight, but I know our folks are pretty thoughtful about doing that, but we'll certainly do kind of another run over and see. The other thing is, as we narrow things, I think we're gonna need different kinds of feedback at different points. And so I think there's still multiple opportunities, and sometimes it's easier to have people respond to a little narrower set of possibilities than kind of where we are right now with looking at so many, because it's even overwhelming for staff right now, much less kind of having people comment on that. So I think we can, get feedback at a variety of times. That will be up to Dr. Holman as things progress. But I know that that's, even with the Facility Advisory Task Force, it was so helpful to have that initial existing plan and then bring in new voices coupled with those that had experience. And so I think maybe we could do some blending of that, but we'll certainly kind of give that another once over as we think about the progression of feedback.
I'm glad to hear that we realize that people with expertise are the diverse people.
Absolutely.
That they know those learned and lived experiences.
That's the beauty of having our equity team, of having our special needs PTSA, of those parent groups that are already in place, because that's where we can access people who have really good perspectives, but also have some experience with the district and are close to the work in different ways, and then can add quick value because they're somewhat up to speed. But then we also need to put that out there for everybody, and that's what Thought Exchange and the surveys will start to do, some big picture work, and then we can refine in from there.
And hopefully we can find even more creative ways to engage parents, students, and community.
Absolutely.
Can I just
Yes, go.
Yes, my name was invoked, so I feel compelled to say something. I also, community engagement feedback throughout the process is critical, and the timeline for the decision making around all of this work is extremely rapid. So when I think about school opening, September 2020, that is literally around the corner. And so it's that balance between getting feedback and making good quality decisions based on the data and feedback we do have. Matt talked a little bit about the plan to seek feedback around our remote learning experience from parents and go through that process with them. And each of the work groups will think about what's the best way for them to reach out, get feedback so they can turn that around as we're making decisions, because parents also want a decision that then they can plan around. So it's putting all of that together to do the best job we can for our community and kids.
Director Stewart.
All right, thank you. And Director Stewart, please.
Yes. Again, I thank you for the presentation as well. But two things. One, Matt, can we go to your slide that shows the different community reps, if you will, or various, there we go. That the first one. One before that. Can you go back one? There we go.
I think his computer's slow.
Something. He had it up there for 1 second there, and all of a sudden disappeared. The one that basically talks about the various needs groups, if you will. They specify bullet by bullet by bullet by bullet.
I think that's it. I think he's got it.
There we go. That's it. Don't move it. I don't see anything on there, and maybe it's me, but I don't see anything about that addresses the students, the behavioral problem students, the behavioral disability students, if you will. They are part of the autism spectrum, but they are part of other parts of that list. I don't see it called out, and it just seems to me with them having had the worst of the spring session, I think that anyone had, because the behavior related to be done face to face and couldn't be or wasn't. I think they really need to make sure that their needs are addressed specifically. Is it possible to focus on have that be one of the focus points?
Well, certainly. So I would say, what you're seeing there is just a sample. It's a not exclusive list. What we're currently in the process of, each of these subgroups have developed pages of documentation, and we're in the process of kind of pulling those all together, and we'll be reviewing them so that if there's groups that haven't been identified, that we look at those, we look at how those needs may or may not be similar or different from others. But this is not an exhaustive list. It's just an example of some of the groups that we've talked about. There's probably twice as many of these that we have in a draft format right now.
Well, if you could, please, as you look at your larger list, please make sure that the behavioral folks are taken care of. Second of all, with two different groups, with basically the Gen Ed, the first group that Mike was talking about, and now the group that Matt's talking about, having those two different paths, if you will, how do we proceed on inclusion? Because there seems to be a disconnect, unless it's just me, but it seems to be that we're kind of putting inclusion maybe on the back burner if we're not careful. And maybe this comes at some stage, but I'm not seeing it now.
I think that's a good point, Mike.
To it. It's part of our guiding principles. So, for example, the Educate Each Student has a whole series of things that team needs to look at, and one of those is inclusive learning communities for students. Our plan, when we say Educate Each Student, is that we have to make sure every student's included in general education curriculum as a start. And then what do they need in addition to that to help them succeed? And so I think, as Matt mentioned, we've given you a very high level update, but underneath each of these bullet points are lots and lots of planning efforts that are happening as well.
Yeah, the level of specificity that we need to go to then blend it together is pretty complex. And so some things have to be thought about in isolation before then they can be put back into that inclusion kind of a framework. And our project is continuing, so applying the inclusion work from that to the whole COVID return thing, it's good timing because it's even more complex in thinking forward with that, given some of the other constraints that are now in place. So it's a good point.
Mark, I'll add one more thing too. We're going to be building in, for example, how we've been learning about universal design for learning. And so as thinking about how do teachers deliver instruction to make it accessible and all the different ways in which students express their understanding, that will be built into that instructional framework and part of the training. And we're thinking about trying not to have lots of new initiatives, but to have things that actually help kids to learn and then build those into the training. So we see that as a real great opportunity to build in some things probably at a much more rapid pace than we would have otherwise.
Just a thought for those that you share this information with, and as just a mention of the word inclusion might help, so you don't have people walking away with the wrong impression.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
I think it'd be good to do an update even on the project and how all that fits together with the current work around inclusion and the return to learn.
Perfect. Thank you. That'd be great.
Okay.
Hang on just real quickly. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to, so as this is a lot of information, it's clear there's a lot of work and conversation that's happening and going on. And I know there is the web page. Are there any updates that are getting put there of any minutes from those meetings so that people can go there and access that to just get a quick summary? I'm thinking of some of the work that's coming out of here appears to me doesn't just apply to right now, but it has potential to really be informative, much more long-term. And I know I would love the opportunity to be able to go and see it. And that's just a way of sort of keeping people informed. So I guess that would be my question. Is that possible?
The short answer is yes. And one of the things that we're working on right now is kind of the public-facing documents, because this is so extensive. It's how do we make it digestible but still informative. And so Mike and Shannon and other people are kind of doing mock-ups of that. We're also collaborating with some of our other area districts and looking at how we do things similarly, so that if you're looking at multiple districts, it may not look like vastly different than some of our neighboring districts. We just had a regional meeting this morning. So we're gonna try and push things out as fast as we can, and also make it so that we don't put people in a panic, because I will tell you, probably the majority of emails that I've gotten right now from parents are just pleading with us to go back to school full-time and to not even consider remote learning. So I think we have to balance putting out the options that are being considered with also not portraying that as this decision is made, because we do want that feedback and we do want to honor what people give us through that process. So yes, we're going to try and keep that coming very frequently.
Well, I think Mike made it very clear that what you see right now might not be what you see in a month, and I think that's the important component. At the same time, that process is key for people to also be aware of. So appreciating any type of way that can get digested and put up would be beneficial.
Yeah, we also were told the OSPI guidance was coming today, so we were kind of waiting to make sure we didn't put something out and then have to pull it back like other districts have had to once OSPI guidance did come out. But that's not coming probably until at least the end of the week, so I think we'll probably want to go ahead and potentially push some things out even ahead of that. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Mark,
okay.
Yep. Mark, did you have another question, or is hand just still up?
No, I have another hand, another question. I just want to make sure, I don't see, and perhaps it's just the idea that we felt that we blended it in, but there was a lot of recommendations from the Urban Coalition on SPED that seem to have kind of evaporated. And while we're in this new transition, if you will, it would be great to see that revisited, looked at, and see how we can include it while we're rebuilding the building, if you will. Because if we don't, there are a lot of great concepts that really just vaporized within a month. In fact, some of them vaporized before the report was out. And I'd love to see them revisited and adapted into these new plans.
One of the things we might want to consider is, as we put information out, we're looking at so many different sources to try and glean. We may need to just do kind of a bibliography page so that people can see where different guidance is coming from, so we can think about that.
Well, we paid so much for the Urban Coalition plan, it'd be ashamed to see it just gathering dust on a shelf. Yep. And the parents want it too.
All right, we'll see what we can do. I just committed people to more work, so I have to be cautious what I'm
That's
saying.
all right.
I'm a short timer.
Yeah, well, I'm not.
No, that's true. Okay, we still have Sally and John with some updates specific to technology. So if we're good with questions kind of from this segment, I'd like to move us to that if we can. I'm just watching.
I think that's a great idea. And if there's any further questions, I'm sure we can ask, and this will be coming up as it goes through, so we can always email them in.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, Sally, it's all yours.
Alrighty. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And I'm trying to make it so I can see everybody while I present. Okay. So I'm just wanting to give you a quick high-level overview of technology operations, current state, before and since COVID, summer, and then back to school planning. So today, we saw you back in November, and we're able to give you an update. So just a little reminder, we had 32,000 computers in place in the system, 36,000 Office 365 accounts. It's kind of grown since we saw you last by about 1,000. We have 282 million curricular tools and accounts provisioned annually for students and teachers. And projects that were underway, part of the Tech Levy funding and part of our 4-year strategic plan for technology, the field trip ticket system, Bus High. So these things are already in play, and we needed to keep them moving forward for the work of the district. The elementary security cameras are being installed now. I'll just talk on a couple others. The smartboard installations is a 3-year project, and we finished elementary, and we're 2/3 finished with secondary. So that will continue for another year. We had to stop for a minute during COVID closure, and then now we've accelerated because we can get in the buildings and get access to the classrooms quickly. So hopefully we'll wrap that up, I hope by December, maybe into the spring. New student laptops, every year we go through an RFP and we acquire new laptops, the current model for 6th and 9th graders who will keep them for their careers in middle and high school. We have an e-discovery system, something may not have come across your radar before, but we have an obligation to journal all of our communications, and we have an older system that was starting to fail on us, so we are migrating all of our data, our email and communications into a Microsoft platform, which is e-discovery. It's part of our Office 365 licensing. So that's a multi-month project, and I think we have data in from February forward, so we're going backwards now, about 10 million emails and attachments. And then the board document management and video broadcasting systems are underway, which you'll be able to use sometime when they're ready in the late summer. And then technology planning, I don't know if we talk about it much, but our team also participates directly with Brian Buck and team on all of the bond, school expansions, and portable projects, and then we oversee the implementation of the technology piece of those. And then we are building out the image. We've actually built out the image and tested the image for new instructional software and all the operating systems and browsers and things that students will need for next school year. So the COVID closure. Starting in March, we pivoted. In addition to do the work of the district, we started building out our infrastructure to handle the traffic and the storage that would come with remote learning for all students and staff. We licensed all students with Teams. We built behind the scenes 5,761 classroom teams for teachers who had courses with enrolled students in them, and then for specialists and those that work with groups of students in pull-out or other situations. We created and launched classroom teams and stream video professional development and placed it in our professional learning management system so that teachers could take a 2.5-hour crash course so they could be up and running on classroom teams as quickly as possible. We prepped all of the elementary laptops for remote use. Those were built for use in carts within our network in the school building, so they didn't have the direct access technology. So we needed to touch them all. And then we also put out opportunities for parents, both directly and through our administrators and their staff, to request technology. So we issued at the local level, at each school building, 3,973 laptops to pre-K and elementary families and 327 hotspots. We issued 200 hotspots for secondary students for internet connectivity. We had a lot of movement in hotspots. People requested them, we'd prep them, we'd get them to the schools, and then they'd say they didn't want them, or they had requested one and they thought it was something else. So we've had a lot of movement in hotspots, but we haven't had any new requests lately. We also launched the Family Technology Access Help Desk, and that was specifically for our parents and our students and our families to call or submit a help ticket for help with technology needs. And that's coupled with our Parent Questions email helpline that we also have had in place for a number of years. We also expedited a purchase of laptops. We used some of our desktop replenishment money that we knew would convert to laptops later on. More and more people are requesting laptops to do their work. We got it prepared, and we have put out 800 laptops to former desktop workers when we were on site. And then we also had to develop cleaning protocols for our technology. So we reached out to all our vendors. We didn't want to void our warranties. We got the right products that we needed, and then we set out acquiring them and cleaning the technology, and that's still underway. Daily communication since COVID, we've had 1,400 voice calls daily and 1,400 Teams calls. And back in November, we reported we had about 3,000 calls daily. So it looks like Teams has kind of taken half of our load, probably internal calling. And then 55,000 team chats. So that would be like quick messages if people aren't familiar with Teams, but I think everyone is here. Back in November, we had maybe 3,000 to 4,000, and we were at that point just learning with our staff and administrators on how to do adult-to-adult collaboration. We had 75,000 emails sent and 275,000 emails received daily. That's gone up quite a bit. Back in November, we had 1 million in a month and 4 million received in a month. So we're using email more, and we believe it's to reach out to our parents. Customer support. So our ticket volumes are very, very, very high. Triple almost 4 times what they normally are. We have 8,395 help desk tickets. That's internal staff. And then we have 7,325 family technology access tickets since the 18th of March. We're keeping pace with them as best we can. Our closure rates in tier 1 are within 24 to 48 hours of receipt. We're at 95%. We're way down from that. Probably, it's hard to analyze because we get duplicate tickets, but I'm going to guess we're in about a 70% closure rate after 24 hours of receiving the ticket. We have about 9 technicians that normally would work on site who are working from home because of COVID-related issues. So they are on the ticket system all day long, every day, along with our 12 people on site. Our customer storage is at 120 terabytes now compared to 85 terabytes in November. Back when I saw you in November, I shared some interesting facts. 85 terabytes would give you 1.5 million hours, 1,445,000 hours of music, or 164 years of streamed music without stopping. So we're well over that, and to me, I'm sure that's a product of the use of Teams and Stream video, which teachers are using. So summer, the first one I want to talk about for just a little minute. Well, we are rolling in student laptops that are not needed for summer learning. We're doing it in 2 waves. We're doing it as school is ending and then after summer school ends. And why are we doing this? Well, we built our system to work very well and manage our technology within our network. With all of our devices out in the field, they've lost, they haven't had a lot of security updates. They've had little problems that we weren't able to touch and fix at the student help desks or in the carts. So we are updating all of the operating systems, the security and the software application version, so they're all current and everyone has a good experience when we start school next year. We're stabilizing those accumulated issues that occurred for the last several months. We're adding the new image to the laptops, and just a note, we are leaving hotspots and laptops with every family that relies on those hotspots for their single connection to the internet and to school. I did have an opportunity because I was seeing some chatter in some of the Facebook pages that North Shore was leaving all their equipment out. And so we were getting questions, why can't you do what North Shore's doing? So I called the North Shore CTO, Alan Miedema, and I said, Alan, how are you doing this? Tell me what you know that I don't know. And Alan shared with me that they were only leaving their Chromebooks out. So those are really browser type tablet things that access web tools. They were calling in all of their Windows and Mac operating system devices for the same reasons we are. I thought, well, I'll give Bellevue a call because Bellevue has a similar infrastructure and size and shape that we do, and the technology director there, Jason Golak, is very, very good. And I asked him, are you rolling in? Yes, they're rolling in for the same reasons we are. And then we're also, for summer, providing summer school customer support that Kelly and others have updated you on over the last week, I think. We're preparing and supporting distribution of computers for all of our new teachers and supporting their remote orientation. We will be performing health checks and maintenance on all of the classroom technology. We have about 2,000 different learning spaces where we need to get in, clean the technology, update it, make sure it's all working as best we can. With some of it's been a little bit dismantled, but we need to touch it all. And then we'll be implementing the technology, as I mentioned, in all the new bond expansion and portable projects. We will be rolling over what we call rollover, our 2019 and 20 systems, applications, software, and provisioning, and then provision it we'll also be provisioning summer school and then provisioning our 2021 classes. So that all occurs, it's orchestrated over the next 2 months after school's out. And then lastly, we'll be working to consolidate content for our instructional platforms. So we have content, I think Jen mentioned it earlier, where we want to really synthesize and align our content so our teachers can more easily get to the content and the information they need to deliver their instruction. And then school year 2021, just a glimpse at what we're planning. We'll be rolling out the student laptops again. We haven't worked out the details of that, but we've relied heavily on our schools in the past. They helped us with the rollout when COVID closure hit, and we'll be doing some kind of modified rollout with our schools again. Contingent planning. So for technology, we're looking at two things. Should we be remote or in a bigger remote situation? Is there a way that we can expand elementary preschool laptop availability? There are some ideas we have. We typically surplus those senior devices because they've had a lot of wear and tear, but we think in the earlier grades, the image is smaller, the wear and tear is less. We may be able to repurpose some of those and get closer to one-to-one for elementary should we need it. And we are going to be continuing with service systems and tools for very different scenarios, all remote, all on-site, or the hybrid that we've talked about tonight. And then better methods. We're actually evaluating better methods to manage and update our technology remotely. And that evaluation includes cost, benefits, staffing, time, what it would take to do it. But we know there probably is a better way than what we're doing if we remain in a remote situation. We're also cleaning technology. Right now, we've ordered $2,500 worth of cleaning wipes to wipe down every laptop one time. So if you do the math on that, if we do come back into school, we're going to need a better cleaning methodology than one time a year. So we're looking at, we've actually ordered an ozone cleaning cart for 30 devices to test it. We have a UV wand coming in, and then we've got to find someone who can help us test for actual bacteria once we use them to see if they might hold some promise for a one-time purchase that will last us a lot longer. And then better methods for assisting families with internet connection needs. It's been pretty hard to help families with hotspots, and we've reached out to Comcast for Internet Essentials, and they will not let us work on behalf of our families with them for their Internet Essentials and free internet. So I'm taking that on as a personal goal to try to find a public-private partnership or some kind of method to help our families get internet easier. Right now, we'll be paying $10,000 a month for the mobile hotspots that we have out, and so that probably wouldn't be sustainable. We want a little bit better method, and we want an easier method. Hotspots aren't the easiest method to connect. So that was all I had.
Thank you, Sally. We can take a few questions, and then President Bleasner, I'm going to suggest a break between this and our budget presentation because we had a short update for the board, and it is almost 7 o'clock, which is great information, but a little longer than we anticipated. Mr. Stewart.
Yes, I think that's a great idea.
Sally, thank you very, very much for comparing our efforts to North Shore and Bellevue, because there's not an hour that goes by that someone on Facebook doesn't say that so-and-so's doing much better than we are. And it's, thank you.
You're
because
welcome.
I think the audience really need to hear that. And because it's always, what's the old saying, it's always greener over the septic tank. So everyone else always has something better than we do. And having them told, look, they're doing the same thing we are. I hope they're listening, if nothing else. If not, I'll play that tape over and over and over again for them. Thank you.
I believe every district has that problem from what my colleagues tell me.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. Appreciate that you're really thinking about the fact that families who might need it and therefore can have it for the whole summer and that's not returned. I think that's a big component for our equity and really making sure they have access. And the thoughtfulness of how do you partner with maybe one of our communications and starting to look at how we provide this interact, knowing this is such a key component for where learning is going, that being able to provide that to all our families effectively is sort of a vital step. So this is a good push to do that. And it's a lot of work you have going on. So thank you for all of that. So appreciate the quick update. Any other questions? Mr. Stewart, I see your hand is still in the air.
It is.
Okay, go.
Aerobics for the meeting. Sally, two quick questions. One is the speech generating devices for the special needs kids. Is this an opportunity now that as we're doing this, since PECS doesn't exactly work remotely, if you will, I know that my son's talking to his speech therapist twice a week and they're using online speech generating devices. Is this perhaps an opportunity to expand that effort?
So I don't know very much about that tool and that process, but I will engage with Shannon Hitch and her team and look into it further. I just really don't know what it takes and what the bandwidth requirements are.
Okay. It's just that they seem to work very well in reaching those kids that still have that communication problem early. And second of all, with Comcast not being what I consider exactly cooperative, this might be a time that perhaps parents could get into the shaming mode and shame them publicly to get them to be motivated to work with the educational system. Just a thought.
Yeah, so I'd just like to comment, I wouldn't like to characterize them as not cooperative. They have things around their program that they offer that they want to get firsthand from the family. They don't want somebody in between them and their free service or their $9.95 service and the family that they're delivering to. So I haven't given up yet. We'll see if I can persuade somehow.
It just seems like they need to realize that this isn't normal times, and perhaps they need to realize that it's not time for the same old, same old.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? If not, we will take a break. I say till 7 o'clock. It's a nice round number.
Sure.
No, you want?
Yep.
We can go 5 to 7.
Let's do 7. By the time we all get up and disengage our faces from the screen, it'll probably take us a couple minutes. And I would say too, if there's anybody who does not need to be on for the budget overview, you can certainly feel free to jump off in the interim.
So we will plan to meet back here at 7.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Eric, did you have something to say? Okay, he's gone.
No, only that 7 sounded great. Thank you.
Thanks to everybody who was on to present. We appreciate it. It's a lot of complex work happening here and in districts across the nation, so we appreciate you joining us tonight. Okay, we'll be back.
live support.
Now you're live, and we're back.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody. So now we will go to the next part, which is doing the budget for 2021. So I will hand it back to you, Dr. Staben, and I believe it'll go to Barbara.
Yep, and as you know, part of the budget process at this point is you had a quick kind of refresher just around process used at one of our last meetings, and you have all been around for a little while now, so you kind of know the drill. And so this is now our study session where Barbara provides an overview of what we are putting together for a draft. And I would entertain questions, and I know we can also take questions too if there are specific things that you want to know about that come to mind after the study session. So I'm going to turn it over to Barbara, who can share kind of the culmination of all of the processes that lead up to this, which is staff requests that then get reviewed, that then get feedback, that then get boiled down into this draft budget, and that's even still in process. And then we share this back with staff, and so it winnows it down to that point then when the board will vote on that budget in September. So go ahead, Barbara.
Great, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, it's being... All right, so, and then let me, okay. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm pausing. It's shared differently than I'm used to it sharing. So, anyway, I'll just get started on the presentation. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about our budget and preliminary budget, and we'll go over policies, process, and timeline. Then we'll go provide an update on our strategic work and resource alignment, and then we'll talk about the preliminary 2021 budget, and then get some feedback from the board. So first we'll review the policies that drive the budget work, and our policies, policy 6000 provides for staff participation and sharing recommendations with the board, sharing recommendations with citizens and our community prior to action. As a district, we solicit input from our departments and program managers, request budget add from staff. They're taken to our representative team for review and provide feedback, and then we're here tonight sharing those recommendations, and we shared the process earlier in a study session as well. So and then this is part of the same policy that the budget is adopted in a budget hearing, and we hold a budget meeting prior to that adoption. Then the budget, what is in the budget is also driven by what is in OE5, our financial planning operating expectations. So I won't go over each of those. This is our timeline for the budget process. We shared this at the prior study session. And so we're here in June where we're holding the study session, and at the next meeting in June we'll give the preliminary draft budget presentation. That will start our public feedback period, and then in August we hold a public hearing and final board approval. So next we're going to go over is our strategic work, and we work really hard to tie our budget and to our strategic plan, and you can see our district has been awarded the meritorious budget for the last 3 years, and that just goes to our commitment to sound fiscal management and budgetary policies. And again, our goal is to align our resources to our strategic plan. And so we'll be sharing with you how what additions we're making to the budget in relation to our strategic goals. So I'm going to go through the next 5 slides showing the additions that we're making to the budget for our strategic goals. And every year we go through a request process, as I said, and getting input from our departments. And there were many more requests than you'll see here. We couldn't say yes to everything. And given our unknown for the fall, we also wanted to make sure our ads were focused on reopening school. And so we did have to say no to other requests due to the current school closure and just the unknown impacts in the fall. So first of all, what we're recommending as additions to the budget in the academic success category, it's approximately $8.6 million, and that's composed of elementary associate principals. That was making all elementaries having a full-time associate principal rather than the part-time, sharing a part-time principal as they do now. And then special education, we're setting aside $4 million to as reserve funds to provide for behavior supports, paraeducator staff, and paraeducator staffing, and additional needs in that department. And then we are also setting aside $2 million for instructional and operational support, reserving funds for professional training. You heard Jen Rose and Kelly talk about the additional training needs for remote learning and support and staffing related to reopening schools. And then tech integration, you heard Sally talk about the additional needs and for technology. Actually, that's on a different slide. This is more of our instructional technology, so providing additional support for our instructional technology. And then data research and accountability, again, additional specialist support for the data needs and accountability that we have and will continue to have in this remote environment. And then we are also providing some additional support to our high schools, dean of students. Those are teacher, it's part of our teacher association positions, and they are released full-time from their position to provide additional support at the high schools. So that's a total of $8.6 million. The next slide is our strategic goal of well-being, and we are providing additional support of approximately $234,000 for our middle schools for supervision. We're going to be evaluating really the highest need at our middle school. It could be lunchroom supervision, it could be campus security monitoring, or a combination. So we're really going to do some more work on identifying specifically those needs. The next slide, sorry, that clicker, is our community engagement area of strategic goal, and we have a small ad here of $20,000, and this is for a website tool called AudioEye, and based on ADA requirements, we need to maintain our website that is accessible. And it really automates, what this tool will do is automate work that's now being done manually by our staff. So it will make our systems and processes more efficient. So the next goal area is excellent staff. And we have about $200,000, $147,000 for additional professional learning management software system support. And that is our remote professional development, or our online video, and how we can do professional development through remotely. And given our remote work, that's more and more important, and this will help continue shaping our systems and expanding our ability to provide professional development through this system. And then the last goal area is effective use of resources. And we have four additions here totaling about $700,000. So business services, we've heard for a long time on needing, right now we have online credit card acceptance, but we haven't had the ability to accept credit cards on site. And and primarily because, again, our initial reason for going to credit cards was to reduce the face-to-face interaction with the bookkeeper and have more and more people pay their fees online. But obviously, it's become apparent we need to also have those accepted on site so that students can give their credit cards, their own debit cards, to the bookkeepers as well. So that fee is really related to the additional fees, the credit card fees that will be charged because of that. In the facility maintenance area, we have ongoing inspection and testing support requirements, but the majority of those dollars are for additional custodial support. As we have more and more buildings, and as our buildings are larger, as we build new buildings, we need to continue to add custodial support. Our data research and accountability area, we are currently our student and fiscal software is migrating or being upgraded to a new program called Cumulative, and I think that's at 2 years from now, we will need to migrate our software. So this is a position that will help lead that effort, and because that will be a huge effort in all of our areas affecting the whole district for attendance and payroll and HR, so that'll be a big project. And then technology services, this was the area, is all the supports that Sally is providing additional help in that department. So all of those goal areas are, it's clicking differently than I'm used to. So all of those goal areas add up to $9.7 million of the strategic work adds. And we have, this isn't all, of course, our whole budget is geared toward our strategic work. And in prior years, we've added a similar amount. Last year, we added about 7.7 million. Of this represents, the 9.7 million represents about 2% of our total expenditure budget. And 3.4 of that is ongoing, and the majority, the remaining, is one time, because as you'll see further on in this presentation, we also are spending down our fund balance, and so we wanted to make sure that the majority of these expenditure adds were one time, because the fall outlook is really unknown. So the next section I will present, let me get my, there we go, is the preliminary budget. And so I'm going to just give you an overview of kind of the key changes in each of the areas in enrollment and revenue and expenditure. So this represents the budget to budget enrollment picture by level, by elementary, middle, senior, high, and then our skills center and ALE. So this shows a change of 793 students. And just a reminder that we saw about 500, almost 600 of that growth this year. So what we budgeted in 1920, we actually received almost 600 students above the budget. And so what we're budgeting to increase over this year is a much smaller increase of 217 students over this year. So that's reflected in that. And just a reminder, this budget is average annual FTE. It is not our head count number, because that's what we're funded on, is average annual FTE. We also add to the budget on top of this a 500 student contingency in case we do receive more students than we normally do, like we did this year. As we've shared before, we're very conservative when it comes to estimating our enrollments, so we don't overcommit our revenues and expenditures. Our elementary budget is based on projections. We are tracking our how we're trending to those projections, and right now we are on trend. What happens this summer will really depend on if those trends continue. And then secondary budget is based on actual registrations. So, and we are graduating about 1,600 students and bringing in, over 2,200 kindergartners. So that's part of why we continue to grow, is the fact that we are still graduating smaller class sizes. The bubble hasn't reached, is really at 9th grade right now. And so we're still graduating smaller classes than we're bringing in. So the next slide is our other programs, such as CTE and special ed, and these are additional enrollment changes that drive both our revenues and expenditures. There's really not a lot of change here. We're keeping our CTE projections the same. We're keeping our EL projections the same, and Running Start. And within special ed, you'll see birth to 2. This is where, and you'll see that further on in the presentation as well, our The legislature is transitioning our Birth to Two funding and expenses are being transferred to the Department of Youth and Families. So we no longer need to budget the enrollment for those students, and we no longer will budget the revenues and expenditures. So it's being transferred out of our responsibility for that. And then in preschool, just a slight decrease in preschool, and then a slight increase in K-21. So next we'll talk about the key changes in revenue and planned. These are based on both key changes in legislative changes, enrollment, staffing, grant and fixed cost adjustments have all been incorporated into the budget for both revenues and expenditures. So first we'll review the state legislative changes. The majority of impact we see each year is when the state provides a salary IPD, and the IPD provided this year was 1.6%. They also changed the benefit allocation and the pension allocation. So altogether for state salary compensation is $6.9 million. We also receive an inflationary factor on our materials and supplies, another $800,000. The special ed formula provided a slight increase in funding, another $200,000. And as I mentioned, the special ed infant and toddler transfer has a negative revenue effect of $2.9 million. So total legislative changes of $5 million. And then our enrollment increases, the 793 students that we talked about, is a $7.8 million impact. Our levy, our incremental levy increase each year is $2.9 million. And then we also have changes in our categorical programs due to enrollment changes in EL, lab, and Running Start, and then transportation. We received slightly more funding from the state this year due to higher expenditures as well. So, and then our federal grants, our Title I program, we actually received, for the 1920 budget, our Title I funding almost doubled. It increased by $1 million. And because we fell off, or we got back on what I call the cliff, and our factors provided some more money for us. Well, unfortunately, those factors went right back down for the 2020 school year. So our allocation decreased $1 million. We are using carryover because our money increased so substantially this year. We did not spend all of it this year, plus in addition to the school closure. So we're using carryover to smooth out the large decrease. So we're only decreasing the budget by $100,000. And then next year, a year from now, we'll have to continue to reduce that. Additional reductions will be needed. And then a small change in our federal special ed funds, and then our grants and self-supporting programs such as extended day nutrition services, accelerated programs, and our capital transfers increased by $500,000. I put a little footnote here. We are waiting for authorization from OSPI for the federal CARES SER relief funds. We are expected to receive $1.6 million, and we are waiting for OFM to approve this money for us, and we would hopefully be able to use that against and claim expenditures for supplies and cleaning related to the school closure, childcare expenses. And so the concern we have, though, is our legislature potentially using this money like they did back in 2009 when they received money from the feds. Instead of giving that money to districts, they gave the money to districts but then decreased their basic ed money to offset it. And so our hope is that they don't give us this $1.6 million in allocation and then come fall they say, sorry, we're going to lower your basic ed allocation by $1.6 million. So we're keeping an eye on that. We do need to talk to our legislators about making sure that they don't take those funds away from us. So this money is not reflected in this draft budget numbers that we're going to show you. We're waiting to, again, get authorization for that. So just to summarize, our key revenue changes are $17.2 million, which is a 3.7% increase over the prior year. So one slide on expenditure changes, our staffing due to our expenditure changes are 24.6 million. Our staff due to enrollment is 5.5 million. Compensation related to bargaining agreements and the benefits and the pension is 11.2 million. And the IPD, of course, that the state passed through, that's included in that as well. As we've talked about, our special ed key change is $2.9 million there. Our categorical grants and self-supporting programs is 1.2 million. Fixed costs every year, our insurance increase. We had another substantial increase in our property and liability insurance premiums, another 500,000. Our utilities, we're expecting to go up 200,000. We also are leasing additional space because of how tight our space is right now. We're leasing additional space for staff and students. And then we also have a small increase in Metro is looking at their finances and having to increase our rates that they charge us for the additional Metro routes by about $40,000. So that's included in that number. Every year we have some one-time expenditures, so that's been taken out of the budget. And then the strategic and organizational work of 9.7 million that we talked about earlier. All right, so one of the things that we've shared with the board, and one of the options available to districts as they work on their budget, is using what we call a set-aside option. It's a school funding term, but the set-aside option is due to the ability districts can set aside fund balance to deal with unanticipated economic conditions. And considering that we are in that condition of an unanticipated economic conditions caused by COVID, we also don't know really what our enrollment might look like in the fall. We don't know what legislative impacts are going to happen in either the 2021 budget or future budgets. We have continued expansion on leave benefits that we don't know what the cost impact of those will be. So we we feel that reserving additional funds to help mitigate any of these economic impacts and that occur next year, and it will allow the district time to kind of go through the process of making decisions on future budget changes. We've discussed, we're looking at between 25 million and even up to 40 million in addition to our fund balance, our reserve of 5%, we're looking at that. So again, anything, it's the accounting terminology for that is GL 872, committed to economic stabilization. It requires formal action by the board, which would happen in the August budget adoption resolution. We describe the conditions, which is the economic issues due to COVID. And then once those amounts are set aside, then we have conditions when we can then spend them. And it's not something that routinely occurs. So again, that would be part of our budget resolution. So when we put the budget together, we are required to do a 4-year budget outlook. We have always done that as a district. Last year it was a new requirement by the state. We have always been prudent in our budgeting. We look beyond the 1-year view, and it helps us make decisions now, keeping that long-term view in mind. So we have put together a budget that takes into account our enrollment growth, our planned future costs, and legislative mandates. It includes one-time spending so that we don't commit future dollars. And our assumptions right now is our enrollment growth slows to 0.5% per year. There's no significant new changes in state funding. And then our levy is based on the current voter approved amounts. We are going back to the voters in 22, so that could affect our future outlook. And then our expenditures, we continue to align staffing with our enrollment growth. We do have local costs that we will need over the state funding for salaries and benefits and retirement. And then there's ongoing fixed costs and strategic ads as part of the assumptions. So this slide, and this is the last slide, shows our preliminary 4-year required outlook. And so the first column is our 1920 budget. And if you remember, our fund balance was growing, grew at the beginning of the 1920 school year, and actually we started the year with a higher fund balance than this budget. We started the year with $80 million in fund balance. And so and we also know that we delayed expenditures the last few years because we knew additional impacts were coming this year and in future years. And as a growing district, we know we need to continue to provide additional support due to our growth. So we intentionally, grew that fund balance, and then we're intentionally using that fund balance going forward. And it will help us offset the difference between revenues and expenditures that you'll see on here. So one of the things that you'll see, so if you look at the 2021 budget column, our total revenue budget is $480 million. Our total expenditure budget is $490 million. And then those are expected to grow over the next 4 years, both revenues and expenditures. We are estimating a beginning fund balance of, we're showing here a reserve of 25. We're showing the 40 million here is reserved, and then that leaves 50 million in our beginning fund balance. And then our ending fund balance would be 40 million with the reserve of 40 million. And as you can see over time, that fund balance, because we are spending over time more than our revenues, that fund balance declines, and it's really combine these two together in that 4th year. That is where last year, when we provided our 4-year plan, we estimated that our fund balance would be about 43 million in 23-24. So that's exactly where it was. So we would put that reserve back into the ending fund balance at that time. So that's kind of what we're looking at as far as the 4-year outlook. Again, as we spend down fund balance, we will need to bring our expenditures back in alignment with our revenues. And so we can do that. So Jane or John, would you like to add anything before we go to questions?
Barbara, could you, oops, somebody needs to mute. I don't think it's Barbara. Can you back up to the enrollment slide toward the beginning?
Yeah,
could you just explain that a little bit more in capturing from 1 year to this next year? I don't know if that was completely clear on how you're factoring that.
So this slide, okay.
Yes.
So the slide, the first column is our budget and enrollment, so what we budgeted in 1920 in the current year. And then what we actually received this year is we had almost 600 students more than this number. So we start with that as a starting point, and then we figure out how many more students do we think we're going to grow for 2021, and those two numbers together are the 793 students. So we're only going to grow by about 200 students from this year to next year, but compared to budget, and maybe I can show the actual next time. So, but from budget to budget, we're growing 793 students, and the majority of that is in elementary right now, and then middle school, and then a small amount at the senior high school.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we clarified that it was only 200, so it might be helpful just to characterize that if we send additional things out. Then could you also go to the slide that characterizes the 4 million for special ed with the 2-year, and just talk about the 2-year window of that. There are some things that are COVID related where we know we're going to need some extra supports as kids come back. And so part of that is to provide kind of an initial push to have more supports. And then over time, we would assume that those could potentially gradually diminish, but you'd have to reevaluate that. Is that a correct way to characterize that?
That's a correct statement. So it's again, looking at it, and this is over a 2-year period as well. So it doesn't mean that we're going to add, we may not add all 4 million in 1 year, right? And so it really is going to address unique needs over time. And then we will definitely have to reevaluate it after the 2 years to see, how much we will need to continue or not.
And then related to that, that includes money in the set-aside dollars, because we know that there are special education as well as general education supports, such as social emotional learning, instructional interventions, and so those cross all students, but this is set aside specifically for special education, and the other set-asides could be used for general education.
Absolutely.
John, I saw you turned your sound on. Did you also want to add something before we take questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to, the overall budget process this year started pre-COVID and ended with us being fully remote, teaching and learning, fully remote working, and caused us to really rethink and evaluate what budget we are going to bring to the board. And so when you look at the proposed spending, new spending for this year, we really evaluated closely how are all of these aligned with helping us reopen school next year. With just a couple of exceptions, that is the totality of this budget, knowing that for our students with special needs, they have been kind of without that direct interaction with adults, knowing that Shannon and her team don't know exactly what those needs are today. So providing some budget capacity for them to be nimble, to be able to be responsive as students are transitioning back, knowing that our staff will need professional learning. And there's some staffing we don't even know that we need right now, but actually setting that money aside so that when we're able to identify a need, we're actually able to take action on that and not just wish we had something. And so that was really the thinking around this budget proposal. Our central leadership team and district leadership team spent a lot of time putting budget proposals together for things that we just didn't feel comfortable funding right now. We also know that our city partners and many civic groups, their budgets look much different than ours. And so this budget also reflects more one-time spending than ongoing spending, because we also know that we're going to need to evaluate kind of where we are budgetarily here in the next couple of years to understand what does state funding look like. Are there significant changes there that we need to pivot from and plan around? So that was kind of the thinking as we were building this proposal and putting this budget together.
Question from Mr. Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Barbara, thank you for enabling the bookkeepers, the secondary school bookkeepers, to take credit cards and debit cards. That's been a long time in coming. I knew there were some barriers, and if there's, I guess if there's anything to be thankful for in this COVID environment, it was a necessity of immunity, if you will. But I really appreciate that. In fact, when I tried to give cash to a cashier the other day in a drive-thru, he sprayed the money. So I said that's a new way of money laundering I've never seen. But anyway, to the, I think there's only a couple of slides before this one where it had an asterisk on federal dollars. The slide numbering prevented me from reading there you go. I can't see the asterisk definition underneath your slide numbers. So.
Oh, okay. Do you want me, I'll read it to you. The asterisk says, waiting for authorization from OSPI for federal elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds, ESSER. Our Lake Washington School District allocation is approximately $1.6 million. So that's the funding that we are, again, expecting to receive, but OSPI hasn't officially told us we have it yet.
Okay, because the federal grants part, it just seemed to be only like 0.8, and that's what threw me. Okay. Tell me the reasoning why we're only expecting 200 plus new students, considering the fact that that for the last 10 years plus we've been heads and shoulders above that, or is it just that we're under budgeting, so we won't have excess funds where we don't need to?
I mean, I think part of it is we have seen our kindergarten numbers are slowing down, so our registrations for kindergarten are a little lower than they were last year, and that's been true since that was pre-COVID as well. So we started registering for kindergarten in February. So elementary is not growing as fast as it normally has, and our bubble, as I mentioned, is in 9th or 10th grade. So we're also, have slower growth. We had a large growth in middle school a couple of years ago, but that's slowing down. So it's really how each of the grade levels are bringing in the new enrollment. But kindergarten is lower than it was the year before. So elementary projections are not growing as much, and elementary really has been the big driver in past years. So what I will do what I'll do for the next presentation is show the difference. I think it will be helpful to show actuals and then the actual to budget difference. So I will do that next time.
Quick question, follow up to that. In a normal scheme of things, when do we usually see our biggest enrollment in kindergarten? Is it in the early months, the mid months, the late months? I don't know if basically what I'm trying to figure out is if the numbers still haven't come in for the heaviest months. I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
It's pretty steady. I mean, it's pretty steady each month. We get a couple hundred students every month, so we are expecting another 200 to 300 to register this summer. And so again, we watch the numbers on a weekly basis to make sure we're still trending, based on past history. But again, we are in a new environment, and so we don't know if any of the trends will hold compared to prior years.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Cassandra, I think you're next.
Thank you. Back on slide 13 on well-being, it looks like we have set aside some one-time money over a 2-year period of time. Is that right?
Oops, sorry, I went past it. Yep, go ahead. No, we haven't set aside one time. This is intended to be ongoing.
Oh, can you go back one? I think maybe it was slide 12.
Okay.
So as far as there was a slide that indicated it was in support of student well-being, and that I'm just wondering if we are considering over the next 2 years the need for additional counselors or mental wellness supports.
That would fall within that
the situation that we're in.
Yep, that set aside dollars, those would be funds that we would use kind of based on need. So there's money there that could go toward that. And part of it is just not knowing yet where the needs are going to be the heaviest, and that still gives you the ability to allocate those dollars for that purpose. But that would be part of the set aside rather than the regular ad that would be.
So that would be in addition to this, what you've already brought to us, and this is an addition, and there would be one more addition if you felt like we needed to add more. No?
There's the budgeted items that are on these pages, and then the set aside dollars would be more discretionary that could go towards those social emotional wellness kinds of things.
But in order to continue any kind of counseling support, it couldn't be just a one-time set aside, correct?
I think, all our supports that we have in the budget now are continuing. So all of that is continuing. I think if we find come fall that we're going to need to provide additional supports, we could use a variety of options for that. We could use the set aside funds. We could also, reallocate, some dollars as well.
And I think depending on what the need looks like, then you're still going to, in next year's budget planning, going to factor that in. If that's going to continue to be an ongoing need, that then you define more specifically for budget ads.
Okay, so I guess I would just say, I have a feeling we're going to need a lot more mental wellness support. I hope that we carry that in and consider additional counselors where possible.
Yep, that's what that contingency money would be for, because we agree. We know that there's going to be all kinds of different needs. And that, when you do set aside dollars, that's not a typical thing, but it anticipates that there's going to be some pretty intense needs. But until you know what those needs are, you're not sure exactly where and how you may want to direct those funds, but they are there and available and ready to be dispersed, and you can do it quickly because you've already accounted for them as a budget add, and you don't have to go back and say, oh, we need to now add money to the budget. And so that's the advantage.
Right, so it's nice to have those funds. It also would be nice to hit the ground running with additional support. I think John maybe was going to weigh in.
He always shows up, otherwise that camera stays off. I don't know if that's fair.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And so the idea of these reserve funds are, we don't even know what school is going to look like reopening in the fall. Johnny and Matt did a wonderful job of putting budget ads together for kind of that mental health supports in a traditional model. And so had we approved that, the thinking around it was, in a traditional model, all students are coming back to school, what would this support look like? And this allows us to reserve those funds, and as students come back to school, or if they're in a remote setting, be able to say, okay, we had remote services for mental health. What was the level of access? Were those services beneficial? Did students use those? How were they interfacing with our current counselors? So we can ask those questions, and we already have some thinking around what are some of the supports we would want to put in place. And if we find that those are needed, we actually have those plans ready to go. And so that's what these funds are for. And why 2 years? Well, over the next 2 years, we're going to be evaluating what does apportionment look like in this new world. Does the economy just bounce right back and everything's status quo? Does the economy lag? And so those are all of the questions that will be answered over the next 2 years. And then we're going to have some potentially interesting conversations around budget. And so that's the idea around the 2-year reserve monies, is that we know the world will be very different when kids come back to school. Their school experience, kind of their view of the world, everything will be different, and their needs will be different. And so
I appreciate that we are looking at that and understanding that reality. I'm just worried we're going to get there and there won't be the resources to be found, because every school district is going to be looking for those same supports and resources. So I wondered if it was worth bringing something in now to secure the fact that we will have it for fall. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's a good point, and we were doing that even before COVID with the number of supports out there, with counselors being difficult to find. So I think you're correct in that assumption. We'll hope that we can start to anticipate that sooner than later.
Great. Thank you, and thanks, John.
Siri?
Yeah, thank you. Just a few questions. A piece of looking at this is, it'd be nice at some point, and I don't know if you could do this at the next presentation on June 22nd, is the historical piece of what's been added prior. Because as I look at this in the strategic ads, there's concerns that I have, but that's because I'm not recognizing the 3 years prior what was put in to target things, and this is also in addition. So recognize that we're targeting COVID and the needs there, but I do think some historical perspective would be useful. The other component is, so there's actually two different locations where we're speaking about reserving funds, if I'm understanding correctly. You have the 6 million that's set forward as the one time, that's here for special education, instructional, operational support. And then there was the designated funds set aside through GL 872 that was mentioned because of certain specific requirements of the legislative uncertainty, the economic uncertainty. So I had two questions on that bigger set aside piece. Was, you'd mentioned, do we have some ballpark estimates of what we expect those potential impacts could be? Meaning legislative impact, or those where our reasoning for doing this. Also, if in 2 years, I'll be honest, I look at that 4-year budget projection and I look at that ending fund balance, our policy states a 5% ending fund balance. That shows a 2.2 million ending fund balance, which is significantly below our 5%, which I believe is 5 million, or 25 million, I'm sorry. So how do those dollars, when they're put into a GL 872, how do you access those? What if COVID resolves and those dollars are still there? What happens? So I need a little more explanation as to how that functions.
So let me address your first question is kind of, do we know what the potential is? And of course, we can't predict the future, right? Totally. But I did look back in 2009 when we had an economic downturn, and we had to cut our budget at that time due to revenue shortfalls by, I think it was 2%. I don't have the exact percent off the top of my head, but it was 7.9 million. 7.6, 7.9 million is what we reduced the budget by. And so if we look at 5% of our budget, so yeah, that 7.9 was a much less, lower percent. I apologize, I don't have the number with me, but if we look at 5% of our budget is 25 million, right? So that would be, or 22 million right now. So, and I think the state shortfall at that same time was in 2009 is what it's similar to what they're projecting the shortfall now. So I don't anticipate us needing to cut, to have a shortfall all of a sudden of 25 million or 5%. But that is exactly why we're doing this economic set aside, is we just don't know what could happen in the future. And so then your question is, in the 4-year plan, because you're right, what if COVID resolves itself and in 2 years the economic conditions didn't help or didn't come to fruition, or we use some of it? So that would, and we could show this differently this last year, that economic reserve could be unreserved by the board and either spent on certain things relating to, we're reserving it if we have to make cuts. This could be then come back to offset those cuts and prevent us from making some cuts. And then it would be part of just our ending fund balance. So we would still be we'd combine these two at 42.2 million. You're no longer reserving it. You're still well above your 5%, the required reserve.
So my question is, knowing that the policy is the 5%, are we basically waiving it when we look at that if you put it into an economic impact where it doesn't have as much freedom in which to move? That's my question.
I would say no, you're not waiving your 5%, because you're making the decision one budget year at a time. So you're not making that decision, even though I've showed it on this chart, you're making the decision for the 2021 school year. You would need to remake that decision for 21-20 for each year after that. So
right. However, the purpose of the 4 years is to be looking out and seeing what's happening. So my question would be, is 40 million where we should be? How is there a different use from an ending fund balance? And are we okay if showing an ending fund balance at 2.2 million, which is significantly small for a district our size, for a potential of what's going on? So I think, so those are my questions around the overall budget outlook over time. I understand that's at 42 million, but at the same time, I'm just wondering how, why reserve 40 million? Why not reserve 25. Right. What's the difference in which to do so? What's the value? What's the flexibility and financial component attached to that? I appreciate the one-time adds of the reserve funds from the special education and that piece for the flexibility for the years coming. My question is, we need to maintain that fiscal responsibility over those 4 years, and I will say that ending fund balance makes me a little nervous. If by chance another rainy day hits, that's even bigger than what we expect now.
So one of the things that we were talking about today is how do we model this for the board to show an intent of taking specific action around our fund balance, because current fund balance also isn't a good place to be. And so I believe it was in last year's budget presentation, we actually modeled out spending down our fund balance within 4 to 5 years, having it be around that $40 to $45 million mark. And so the intent around how we built the numbers was to show while one fund is decreasing down, the other fund remains constant, more around the concept of a total dollar amount between those two funds. And so it's less about where those funds are and more, what is the total end that we have in 4 years, being that $42 million. So I don't think the intent was to say we're going to violate policy or anything like that. The intent was really to say, here's how we're intentionally spending down our fund balance, but being thoughtful about making sure that we understand the end outcome in 4 to 5 years.
So I think the piece that's disconcerting when I look at that is I think about that 40 million, and let's assume we suddenly have a huge drop and we need to access that reserve economic impact, right? And our ending fund balance is already moving down. So the reality of that economic fund balance, it's supposed to be there as that safety net in which to be able to cover these expenses that come along. Let's assume they do. Well, my fund balance is also decreasing. And so I can't just add those. So there's a little, I guess my concern is the fiscal outlay. And you're right, we could change it the following year. But right now there's only about a $6 million that I saw in the one-time expense column. So then there's a lot of questions of, well, then what do you cut? So I think that's my concern.
And so I think the other piece of this is a year from now, we'll have more information around state funding. And if we see that state funding is going to start decreasing, then we actually need to start taking action around our long-term budget next year in our budget planning and potentially start doing some, reductions in the budget or adjustments in the budget. And so it isn't that we just wait until, 4 to 5 years and then make massive cuts if needed. It's really about understanding on a year-to-year basis, okay, what are the conditions now that are going to cause us in the future to need to do or to take different types of action. So to me, it's about being thoughtful about our spending now and knowing that conditions are going to change in a year from now. I think you asked the question around, do we have an indication as to what the legislature is planning on doing? Unless Jane and Barbara know something I don't believe we have any indication as to what the legislature is going to do. They did some, they weren't cuts because they hadn't been implemented yet, but part of the budget this year, they chose not to implement. Those impacts were essentially nothing to us because there were some new monies, but they weren't anything that we were counting on. Other than that, we don't have a heads up or an indication as to what the legislature is thinking at this point.
One of the good things about the 4-year outlook is you get a 4-year outlook, but those 4 years assume the same conditions over those 4 years, which are never the same. So we can rework that, or we can have some of the contextual pieces with that and take a look at that. I think for it, is there a specific area, or do you want to email us when you talk about the look back, if there are specific areas where you want some of that historical picture more than other areas, let us know what that might be.
I would be along the strategic goals, the same sort of concept. I just know that like the mental health and that we've done some reinforcing there quite a bit, and community engagement, we've done that as well. So it's just having a little more idea of the whole history.
Okay.
And I can certainly pull from last year's slides of where we added and just bring those in. I know in past years, we've showed multiple years, and I can certainly show prior year as well.
And that's part of because a budget isn't a one-time. It's you're thinking over multiple years. And so one year you invest one place and because you did it in the past, or you're planning for the future. So that's just sort of what I'm looking for to understand a little better.
And I think Siri had another question embedded in her comment, and that was around access to those funds. And so Barbara, can you explain how the board would access those funds? In reading the accounting manual, I think I know, but you will articulate it better than me.
Well, I'm just impressed you said reading the accounting manual. So that's, that's great. So we have to, once we set those aside, when we do the set aside, we outline what conditions need to exist for those funds. And it would be, again, significant state cuts, state revenue shortfalls, enrollment shortfalls, for example. And then that would allow, once we've set aside those dollars, once those conditions exist, then we would say we're going to use these set aside funds to offset those conditions. And so we would come, I can't recall that we haven't used this in my lifetime with the district. So I have to work with our, OSPI to make sure that we're, what the exact process is. But then we would come back to the board and say, we are interested in moving these reserve funds into back out of reserve so that we can spend them or offset revenue declines to use as part of the budget. That's what we would do.
And if, let's say, those realities don't come forward, then we basically just flip the funds back. That's just a different resolution and approval.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, and it's a year-over-year approval, so you have to,
we have to prove it each year.
Yes.
We have to prove the set aside each year.
Okay, that is helpful to know. I had not realized that. Thank you.
Okay.
So I think Director LaLiberty and Director Stewart have their hands up.
Mark was first.
So Director Stewart.
Yeah, one of the questions really, I'm not sure, it's half tech, half budget, so whoever wants to handle it, feel free. The Teams chat that Sally was talking about, and the dollars we're talking about for therapists and so forth, the Teams chat, does that include the therapists? Is that a section that's going to go for therapists also, or is it just Teams chat with classroom chat? I can easily ask Sally offline if you'd like.
So, Mark, I just want to make sure I understand the question. Is the question, do therapists use Teams as a venue to do counseling?
No, it was the idea that when Sally was talking about Teams chat statistics, she had Teams chat statistic. Did that include sessions with district therapists or not? Basically, was my question. And I guess that plays into the extra dollars we're going to allocate for Teams.
Yeah. So I guess I don't have an answer to that. I don't believe it's used for therapy, but we would need to check with Sally.
Okay. Again, I wasn't sure. I can just, I'll send her the question and let her answer it offline.
Okay.
Director LaLiberty.
Right. I'm gonna talk now. Barbara, distilling what you were just talking about the GL 872 line item, is it fair to characterize that as, it's even more restricted or committed than if we were to just have it in the fund balance pot, right?
I think it's conscious action. Sorry, go ahead.
I think you were actually starting to answer before I talked.
All right. I think I think even just like our fund balance, our 5% fund balance reserve, if we, with all of fund balance, there's conscious action by the board in order to use fund balance. When you approve the budget, you're approving spending less than the revenues we have, which builds fund balance, or you're approving spending more than the revenues we have, which uses fund balance. So by reserving that or putting this set aside, we're still going to be communicating and talking with the board to say, here's how we're going to allocate these dollars.
Okay, but by putting it in this pot, you can only spend it for the reasons that it's put into the pot, right? Is that I'm just trying to figure out how to distill this down to something that I can communicate or understand.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Barbara, is it fair to say that it's also a way to ensure that our ongoing our good fiscal standing is maintained, and that these funds aren't spent in other places that we don't want them to be spent?
Right.
Yeah. For me, that's key. I mean, I think this makes sense how we have this structured of having it set aside in this fashion, and also using the fund balance we have today for the aims and the goals that we've set as a board. And I'm comfortable with this, even 4 years out, with how we have this structured. So I just want my 2 cents. I think this is a very smart way about going about guarding against the unknowns, while also using our fund balance today to achieve our goals.
Right.
Chris has his hand up.
Director Carlson? I think you might be muted still.
Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties. Okay, I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation, and in an experiment, I didn't barge in and ask all of my questions, and my questions have all been asked, courtesy of the other board members. So thank you very much.
That's the best part of going last, right?
I love this.
So what I will say is I am very supportive of the GL 872 and doing that set aside. It does make a lot of sense. My concern is just really making sure it doesn't hamstring us in the long run, or doesn't place us into a position that doesn't allow us to have the flexibility to meet the strategic goals that we need to at the time.
Yep, and that's good point to make. Global pandemics don't come along very often. I think we just saw this as one way of, kind of holding those funds in a way that allows us to be very prudent with them for the unknown, because that's the intent of that. So that's really what it does. Rather than just having it stay in fund balance that is less defined, this gives it more definition for the big picture budget for these circumstances. Okay, I don't see any other questions.
And I don't either. So it sounds like I think we can wrap up with the budget. So thank you so much for doing all of that. And then this will if I remember correctly, will be presented at the June 22nd as the first hearing, correct?
Correct.
To then be voted on, a public hearing, voted on, approved in August.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. June 20, we will present the complete draft budget June 22nd. That includes all funds in addition to the general fund. And then we will hold the public hearing the first week, and we'll provide public feedback all summer, and then public hearing first board meeting in August, and then final adoption last board meeting. So.
Great, thank you.
Right.
All right, well, thank you very much. And then I guess we are now moving to our executive session, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Correct, yes.
Correct.
We have another link for that, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
we also want to say that when we return, there won't be any further board action?
When we return, we will not be continuing any discussion at our study session since no action can be taken.
Correct. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, so thank you.
See you in the other meeting.